Let's go.
Good evening from the Thomas and Mack Center at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. I'm Chris Wallace of Fox News, and I welcome you to the third and final of the 2016 presidential debates between Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Donald J. Trump. This debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The commission has designed the format, 6 roughly 15-minute segments with 2-minute answers to the first question, then open discussion for the rest of each segment. Both campaigns have agreed to those rules. For the record, I decided the topics and the questions in each topic. None of those questions has been shared with the commission or the 2 candidates. The audience here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No cheers, boos, or other interruptions so we and you can focus on what the candidates have to say. No noise except right now, as we welcome the Democratic nominee for president, Secretary Clinton, and the Republican nominee for president, Mr. Trump. Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump, welcome. Let's get right to it. The first topic is the Supreme Court. You both talked briefly about the court in the last debate, but I want to drill down on this because the next president will almost certainly have at least 1 appointment and likely or possibly 2 or 3 appointments, which means that you will, in effect, determine the balance of the court for what could be the next quarter century. First of all, where do you want to see the court take the country? And secondly, what's your view on how the Constitution should be interpreted? Do the founders' words mean what they say, or is it a living document to be applied flexibly according to changing circumstances? In this segment, Secretary Clinton, you go first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thanks to UNLV for hosting us. You know, I think when we talk about the Supreme Court, it really raises the central issue in this election. Namely, what kind of country are we going to be? What kind of opportunities will we provide for our citizens? What kind of rights will Americans have? And I feel strongly that the Supreme Court needs to stand on the side of the American people, not on the side of the powerful, corporations, and the wealthy. For me, that means that we need a Supreme Court that will stand up on behalf of women's rights, on behalf of the rights of the LGBT community, that will stand up and say no to Citizens United, a decision that has undermined the election system in our country because of the way it permits dark, unaccountable money to come into our electoral system. I have major disagreements with my opponent about these issues and others that will be before the Supreme Court. But I feel that at this point in our country's history, it is important that we not reverse marriage equality, that we not reverse Roe v. Wade, that we stand up against Citizens United, we stand up for the rights of people in the workplace, that we stand up and basically say the Supreme Court should represent all of us. That's how I see the court, and the kind of people that I would be looking to nominate to the court would be in the great tradition of standing up to the powerful, standing up on behalf of our rights as Americans. And I look forward to having that opportunity. I would hope that the Senate would do its job and confirm the nominee that President Obama has sent to them. That's the way the Constitution fundamentally should operate. The president nominates, and then the Senate advises and consents or not, but they go forward with the process.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump, same question. Where do you want to see the court take the country, and how do you believe the Constitution should be interpreted?
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you, and thank you, everybody. The Supreme Court, it's what it's all about. Our country is it's just so imperative that we have the right justices. Something happened recently where Justice Ginsburg made some very, very inappropriate statements toward me and toward a tremendous number of people, many, many millions of people that I represent. And she was forced to apologize, and apologize she did. but these were statements that should never, ever have been made. We need a Supreme Court that, in my opinion, is going to uphold the Second Amendment and all amendments, but the Second Amendment, which is under absolute siege. I believe if my opponent should win this race, which I truly don't think will happen, we will have a Second Amendment which will be a very, very small replica of what it is right now. But I feel that it's absolutely important that we uphold because of the fact that it is under such trauma. I feel that the justices that I am going to appoint, and I've named 20 of them, the justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent. They will be protecting the Second Amendment. They are great scholars in all cases, and they're people of tremendous respect. They will interpret the Constitution the way the founders wanted it interpreted, and I believe that's very, very important. I don't think we should have justices appointed that decide what they want to hear. It's all about the Constitution and so important, the Constitution the way it was meant to be. And those are the people that I will appoint.
Mr. Trump, thank you. We now have about 10 minutes for an open discussion. I want to focus on two issues that, in fact, by the justices that you name, could end up changing the existing law of the land. First is one that you mentioned, Mr. Trump, and that is guns. Secretary Clinton, you said last year, and let me quote, "The Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment." And now, in fact, in the 2008 Heller case, the court ruled that there is a constitutional right to bear arms, but a right that is reasonably limited. Those were the words of the judge, Antonin Scalia, who wrote the decision. What's wrong with that?
Well, first of all, I support the Second Amendment. I lived in Arkansas for 18 wonderful years. I represented upstate New York. I understand and respect the tradition of gun ownership. It goes back to the founding of our country. But I also believe that there can be and must be reasonable regulation. Because I support the Second Amendment doesn't mean that I want people who shouldn't have guns to be able to threaten you, kill you or members of your family. And so when I think about what we need to do, we have 33,000 people a year who die from guns. I think we need comprehensive background checks, need to close the online loophole, close the gun show loophole. There's other matters that I think are sensible, that are the kind of reforms that would make a difference, that are not in any way conflicting with the Second Amendment. You mentioned the Heller decision, and what I was saying that you referenced, Chris, was that I disagreed with the way the court applied the Second Amendment in that case, because what the District of Columbia was trying to do was to protect toddlers from guns. And so they wanted people with guns to safely store them. And the court didn't accept that reasonable regulation, but they've accepted many others. So I see no conflict between saving people's lives and defending the Second Amendment.
Let me bring Mr. Trump in here. The Bipartisan Open Debate Coalition got millions of votes on questions to ask here, and this was, in fact, one of the top questions that they got. How will you ensure the Second Amendment is protected? You just heard Secretary Clinton's answer. Does she persuade you that while you may disagree on regulation, that in fact she supports a Second Amendment right to bear arms?
Well, the D.C. versus Heller decision was very strongly, and she was extremely angry about it. I watched. I mean, she was very, very angry when upheld. And Justice Scalia was so involved, and it was a well-crafted decision. But Hillary was extremely upset, extremely angry, and people that believe in the Second Amendment and believe in it very strongly were very upset with what she had to say.
Well, let me bring in Secretary Clinton. Were you extremely upset?
Well, I was upset because, unfortunately, dozens of toddlers injure themselves, even kill people with guns, because, unfortunately, not everyone who has loaded guns in their homes takes appropriate precautions. But there's no doubt that I respect the Second Amendment, that I also believe there's an individual right to bear arms. That is not in conflict with sensible, common sense regulation. And You know, look, I understand that Donald's been strongly supported by the NRA. The gun lobby's on his side. They're running millions of dollars of ads against me. And I regret that, because what I would like to see is for people to come together and say, of course, we're going to protect and defend the Second Amendment, but we're going to do it in a way that tries to save some of these 33,000 lives that we lose every year.
Let me bring Mr. Trump back into that, because, in fact, you oppose any limits on assault weapons, any limits on high-capacity magazines. You support a national right-to-carry law. Why, sir?
Well, let me just tell you, before we go any further, in Chicago, which has the toughest gun laws in the United States, probably you could say by far, they have more gun violence than any other city. So we have the toughest laws, and you have tremendous gun violence. I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I don't know if Hillary was saying it in a sarcastic manner, but I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the NRA, and it's the earliest endorsement they've ever given to anybody who ran for president. So I'm very honored by all of that. We are going to appoint justices. This is the best way to help the Second Amendment. We are going to appoint justices that will feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, that will not do damage to the Second Amendment.
Well, let's pick up on another issue which divides you and the justices that whoever ends up winning this election appoints could have a dramatic effect there, and that's the issue of abortion.
Right.
Mr. Trump, you're pro-life, but I want to ask you specifically, do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact, states a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that that will go back to the individual states.
But I'm asking you specifically, would you like to...
If they overturned it, it'll go back to the states.
But what I'm asking you, sir, is do you want to see the court overturn? You just said you want to see the court protect the Second Amendment. Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, that will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, I strongly support Roe v. Wade, which guarantees a constitutional right to a woman to make the most intimate, most difficult, in many cases, decisions about her health care that one can imagine. And in this case, it's not only about Roe v. Wade. It is about what's happening right now in America. So many states are putting very stringent regulations on women that block them from exercising that choice, to the extent that they are defunding Planned Parenthood, which, of course, provides all kinds of cancer screenings and other benefits for women in our country. Donald has said he's in favor of defunding Planned Parenthood. He even supported shutting the government down to defund Planned Parenthood. I will defend Planned Parenthood. I will defend Roe v. Wade, and I will defend women's rights to make their own health care decisions. And we have come too far to have that turn back now. And indeed, he said women should be punished, that there should be some form of punishment for women who obtain abortions. And I could just not be more opposed to that kind of thinking.
I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but I want to ask you, Secretary Clinton, I want to explore how far you believe the right to abortion goes. You have been quoted as saying that the fetus has no constitutional rights. You also voted against a ban on late-term partial birth abortions. Why?
Because Roe v. Wade very clearly sets out that there can be regulations on abortion so long as the life and the health of the mother are taken into account. And when I voted as a senator, I did not think that that was the case. The kinds of cases that fall at the end of pregnancy are often the most heartbreaking, painful decisions for families to make. I have met with women who, toward the end of their pregnancy, get the worst news one could get, that their health is in jeopardy if they continue to carry to term, or that something terrible has happened or just been discovered about the pregnancy. I do not think the United States government should be stepping in and making those most personal of decisions. So you can regulate, if you are doing so with the life and the health of the mother taken into account.
Mr. Trump, your reaction, and particularly on this issue of late-term partial birth
Well,
abortion.
I think it's terrible. If you go with what Hillary is saying, in the 9th month, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb of the mother just prior to the birth of the baby. Now, you can say that that's okay, and Hillary can say that that's okay, but it's not okay with me. Because based on what she's saying and based on where she's going and where she's been, you can take the baby and rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month on the final day. And that's not acceptable.
Well, that is not what happens in these cases. And using that kind of scare rhetoric is just terribly unfortunate. You should meet with some of the women that I've met with, women I've known over the course of my life. This is one of the worst possible choices that any woman and her family has to make. And I do not believe the government should be making it. You know, I've had the great honor of traveling across the world on behalf of our country. I've been to countries where governments either forced women to have abortions like they used to do in China, or forced women to bear children like they used to do in Romania. And I can tell you the government has no business in the decisions that women make with their families in accordance with their faith, with medical advice, and I will stand up for that right.
All right. But just briefly, I want to move on to another
honestly,
segment.
Nobody has business doing what I just said, doing that as late as 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 days prior to birth. Nobody has that.
All right. Let's move on to the subject of immigration. And there is almost no issue that separates the two of you more than the issue of immigration. Actually, there are a lot of issues that separate the two of you. Mr. Trump, you want to build a wall. Secretary Clinton, you have offered no specific plan for how you want to secure our southern border. Mr. Trump, you are calling for major deportations. Secretary Clinton, you say that within your first 100 days as president, you're going to offer a package that includes a pathway to citizenship. The question really is, why are you right and your opponent wrong? Mr. Trump, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, she wants to give amnesty, which is a disaster and very unfair to all of the people that are waiting in line for many, many years. We need strong borders. In the audience tonight, we have 4 mothers of, I mean, these are unbelievable people that I've gotten to know over a period of years whose children have been killed, brutally killed by people that came into the country illegally. You have thousands of mothers and fathers and relatives all over the country. They're coming in illegally. Drugs are pouring in through the border. We have no country if we have no border. Hillary wants to give amnesty. She wants to have open borders. The border secure, as you know, the Border Patrol agents, 16,500 plus ICE last week endorsed me. First time they've ever endorsed a candidate. It means their job is tougher, but they know what's going on. They know it better than anybody. They want strong borders. They feel we have to have strong borders. I was up in New Hampshire the other day. The biggest complaint they have, it's with all of the problems going on in the world, many of the problems caused by Hillary Clinton and by Barack Obama, all of the problems, their single biggest problem is heroin that pours across our southern borders, just pouring and destroying their youth. It's poisoning the blood of their youth and plenty of other people. We have to have strong borders. We have to keep the drugs out of our country. Right now, we're getting the drugs, they're getting the cash. We need strong borders. We need we cannot give amnesty. Now, I want to build the wall. We need the wall. The Border Patrol, ICE, they all want the wall. We stop the drugs. We shore up the border. One of my first acts will be to get all of the drug lords, all of the bad ones. We have some bad, bad people in this country that have to go out. We're going to get them out. We're going to secure the border. And once the border is secured, at a later date, we'll make a determination as to the rest. But we have some bad hombres here, and we're going to get them out.
Mr. Trump, thank you. Same question to you, Secretary Clinton. Basically, why are you right? Mr. Trump is wrong.
Well, as he was talking, I was thinking about a young girl I met here in Las Vegas, Carla, who was very worried that her parents might be deported because she was born in this country, but they were not. They work hard. They do everything they can to give her a good life. And you're right. I don't want to rip families apart. I don't want to be sending parents away from children. I don't want to see the deportation force that Donald has talked about in action in our country. We have 11 million undocumented people. They have 4 million American citizen children, 15 million people. He said as recently as a few weeks ago in Phoenix that every undocumented person would be subject to deportation. Now, here's what that means. It means you would have to have a massive law enforcement presence, where law enforcement officers would be going school to school, home to home, business to business, rounding up people who are undocumented. And we would then have to put them on trains, on buses to get them out of our country. I think that is an idea that is not in keeping with who we are as a nation. I think it's an idea that would rip our country apart. I have been for border security for years. I voted for border security in the United States Senate. And my comprehensive immigration reform plan, of course, includes border security. But I want to put our resources where I think they're most needed, getting rid of any violent person, anybody who should be deported. We should deport them. When it comes to the wall that Donald talks about building, he went to Mexico. He had a meeting with the Mexican president, didn't even raise it. He choked, and then got into a Twitter war because the Mexican president said, we're not paying for that wall. So I think we are both a nation of immigrants and we are a nation of laws, and that we can act accordingly. And that's why I'm introducing comprehensive immigration reform within the first 100 days with a path to citizenship.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton. I want to follow up.
I think I should respond to that. First of all, I had a very good meeting with the president of Mexico, very nice man. We will be doing very much better with Mexico on trade deals, believe me. The NAFTA deal signed by her husband is one of the worst deals ever made of any kind, signed by anybody. It's a disaster. Hillary Clinton wanted the wall. Hillary Clinton fought for the wall in 2006 or thereabouts. Now, she never gets anything done, so naturally the wall wasn't built. But Hillary Clinton wanted the wall.
Well,
we are a country of laws. And by the way,
no, wait. I'd like to hear from. I'd like to hear from Secretary Clinton.
I voted for border security, and there are some limited places where that was appropriate. There also is necessarily going to be new technology and how best to deploy that. But it is clear when you look at what Donald has been proposing. He started his campaign bashing immigrants, calling Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals and drug dealers, that he has a very different view about what we should do to deal with immigrants. Now, what I am also arguing is that bringing undocumented immigrants out from the shadows, putting them into the formal economy will be good, because then employers can't exploit them and undercut Americans' wages. And Donald knows a lot about this. He used undocumented labor to build the Trump Tower. He underpaid undocumented workers, and when they complained, he basically said what a lot of employers do. You complain, I'll get you deported. I want to get everybody out of the shadows, get the economy working, and not let employers like Donald exploit undocumented workers, which hurts them but also hurts American workers.
Mr. Trump.
President Obama has moved millions of people out. Nobody knows about it. Nobody talks about it. But under Obama, millions of people have been moved out of this country. They've been deported. She doesn't want to say that, but that's what's happened. And that's what's happened big league. As far as moving these people out and moving, we either have a country or we don't. We're a country of laws. We either have a border or we don't. Now, you can come back in and you can become a citizen, but it's very unfair. We have millions of people that did it the right way. They're online, they're waiting. We're going to speed up the process, big league, because it's very inefficient. But they're online and they're waiting to become citizens. Very unfair that somebody runs across the border, becomes a citizen. Under her plan, you have open borders. You would have a disaster on trade, and you will have a disaster with your open borders. But what she doesn't say is that President Obama has deported millions and millions of people just the way it is.
Secretary Clinton, I want to...
we will not have open borders.
Well, let me
that is a rank mischaracterization.
Secretary Clinton.
We will have secure borders, but we will also have reform. And this used to be a bipartisan issue. Ronald Reagan was the last president to sign immigration reform, and George W. Bush supported it as well.
Secretary Clinton, I want to clear up your position on this issue, because in a speech you gave to a Brazilian bank for which you were paid $225,000, we've learned from the WikiLeaks that you said this, and I want to quote, "My dream is a hemispheric common market with open trade and open borders." So That's
Thank
the
you.
question. That's the question. Please quiet, everybody. Is that your dream, open borders?
Well, if you went on to read the rest of the sentence, I was talking about energy. You know, we trade more energy with our neighbors than we trade with the rest of the world combined. And I do want us to have an electric grid, an energy system that crosses borders. I think that would be a great benefit to us. But you are very clearly quoting from WikiLeaks. And what's really important about WikiLeaks is that the Russian government has engaged in espionage against Americans. They have hacked American websites, American accounts of private people, of institutions. Then they have given that information to WikiLeaks for the purpose of putting it on the internet. This has come from the highest levels of the Russian government, clearly from Putin himself, in an effort, as 17 of our intelligence agencies have confirmed, to influence our election. So I actually think the most important question of this evening, Chris, is finally, will Donald Trump admit and condemn that the Russians are doing this and make it clear that he will not have the help of Putin in this election, that he rejects Russian espionage against Americans, which he actually encouraged in the past? Those are the questions we need answered. We've never had anything like this happen in any of our elections before.
That was a great pivot off the fact that she wants open borders, okay? How did we get onto Putin?
Hold on.
No.
Wait. Hold on, folks, because this is going to end up getting out of control. Let's try to keep it quiet for the candidates and for the American people. Go ahead.
Just to finish on the borders.
Yes.
She wants open borders. People are going to pour into our country. People are going to come in from Syria. She wants 550% more people than Barack Obama. And he has thousands and thousands of people. They have no idea where they come from. And you see, we are going to stop radical Islamic terrorism in this country. She won't even mention the words, and neither will President Obama. So I just want to tell you, she wants open borders. Now we can talk about Putin. I don't know Putin. He said nice things about me. If we got along well, that would be good. If Russia and the United States got along well and went after ISIS, that would be good. He has no respect for her. He has no respect for our president. And I'll tell you what, we're in very serious trouble because we have a country with tremendous numbers of nuclear warheads, 1,800, by the way, where they expanded and we didn't. 1,800 nuclear warheads, and she's playing chicken. Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit that the Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line, sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race. So I think that this is such an unprecedented situation. We've never had a foreign government trying to interfere in our election. We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks, come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our election. I find that deeply disturbing, and I think it's time.
She has no idea whether it's Russia, China, or anybody else.
I am not quoting myself.
No idea.
I am quoting
Hillary, you have no idea.
17 do you doubt 17 military and civilian agencies? Well,
yeah,
he'd rather believe Vladimir Putin than the military and civilian intelligence professionals who are sworn to protect us. I find that just absolutely.
She doesn't like Putin because Putin has outsmarted her at every step of the way. Excuse me. Putin has outsmarted her in Syria. He's outsmarted her every step of the way.
I do get to ask some questions.
Yes, that's
And I would like to ask you this direct question. The top national security officials of this country do believe that Russia has been behind these hacks. Even if you don't know for sure whether they are, do you condemn any interference by Russia in the American election?
By Russia or anybody else.
You condemn their interference?
Of course I condemn. Of course I can. I don't know Putin. I have no idea.
I'm asking
I
you,
never met Putin. This is not my best friend. But if the United States got along with Russia, wouldn't be so bad. Let me tell you, Putin has outsmarted her and Obama at every single step of the way, whether it's Syria, no, you name it, missiles. Take a look at the startup that they signed. The Russians have said, according to many, many reports, I can't believe they allowed us to do this. They create warheads and we can't. The Russians can't believe it. She has been outsmarted by Putin, and all you have to do is look at the Middle East. They've taken over. We've spent $6 trillion. They've taken over the Middle East. She has been outsmarted and outplayed worse than anybody I've ever seen in any government whatsoever.
We're a long way away from immigration, but I'm going to let you finish this topic.
Well,
you got about 45 seconds.
Yeah,
and she always will be.
I find it ironic that he's raising nuclear weapons. This is a person who has been very cavalier, even casual, about the use of nuclear weapons. He's advocated more countries getting them, Japan, Korea, even Saudi Arabia. He's said, well, if we have them, why don't we use them, which I think is terrifying. But here's the deal. The bottom line on nuclear weapons is that when the president gives the order, it must be followed. There's about 4 minutes between the order being given and the people responsible for launching nuclear weapons to do so. And that's why 10 people who have had that awesome responsibility have come out and in an unprecedented way said they would not trust Donald Trump with the nuclear codes or to have his finger on the nuclear button.
I have 200 generals and admirals, 21 endorsing me, 21 Congressional Medal of Honor recipients. As far as Japan and other countries, we are being ripped off by everybody in the world. We're defending other countries. We are spending a fortune doing it. They have the bargain of the century. All I said is we have to renegotiate these agreements because our country cannot afford to defend Saudi Arabia, Japan, Germany, South Korea, and many other places. We cannot continue to afford. She took that as saying nuclear weapons. Look, she's been proven to be a liar on so many different ways. This is just another lie.
Well, I'm just quoting you when
there's
you were
no
asked
quote.
about
You're not going to find a quote from me.
Nuclear competition in Asia. You said, you know, go ahead, enjoy yourselves, folks. That kind
and defend
of language,
yourselves. And defend yourselves. I didn't say nuclear. And defend yourself.
The United States has kept the peace through our alliances. Donald wants to tear up our alliances. I think it makes the world safer, and frankly, it makes the United States safer. I would work with our allies in Asia, in Europe, in the Middle East, and elsewhere. That's the only way we're going to be able to keep the peace.
We are going to move on to the next topic, which is the economy, and I hope we handle that as well as we did immigration. You also have very different ideas about how to get the economy growing faster. Secretary Clinton, in your plan, government plays a big role. You see more government spending, more entitlements, more tax credits, more tax penalties. Mr. Trump, you want to get government out with lower taxes and less regulation.
Yes.
We're going to drill down into this a little bit more. But in this overview, please explain to me why you believe that your plan will create more jobs and growth for this country and your opponent's plan will not. In this round, you go first, Secretary Clinton.
Well, I think when the middle class thrives, America thrives. And so my plan is based on growing the economy, giving middle class families many more opportunities. I want us to have the biggest jobs program since World War II, jobs in infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. I think we can compete with high-wage countries, and I believe we should. New jobs and clean energy, not only to fight climate change, which is a serious problem, but to create new opportunities and new businesses. I want us to do more to help small business. That's where 2/3 of the new jobs are going to come from. I want us to raise the national minimum wage because people who live in poverty should not, who work full-time should not still be in poverty. And I sure do want to make sure women get equal pay for the work we do. I feel strongly that we have to have an education system that starts with preschool and goes through college. That's why I want more technical education in high schools and in community colleges, real apprenticeships to prepare young people for the jobs of the future. I want to make college debt-free, and for families making less than $125,000, you will not get a tuition bill from a public college or university if the plan that I worked on with Bernie Sanders is enacted. And we're going to work hard to make sure that it is, because we are going to go where the money is. Most of the gains in the last years since the Great Recession have gone to the very top. So we are going to have the wealthy pay their fair share. We're going to have corporations make a contribution greater than they are now to our country. That is a plan that has been analyzed by independent experts, which said that it could produce 10 million new jobs. By contrast, Donald's plan has been analyzed to conclude it might lose 3.5 million jobs. Why? Because his whole plan is to cut taxes, to give the biggest tax breaks ever to the wealthy and to corporations, adding $20 trillion to our debt and causing the kind of dislocation that we have seen before, because it truly will be trickle-down economics on steroids. So the plan I have, I think, will actually produce greater opportunities. The plan he has will cost us jobs and possibly lead to another Great Recession.
Secretary, thank you. Mr. Trump, why will your plan create more jobs and growth than Secretary Clinton?
Well, first of all, before I start on my plan, her plan is going to raise taxes and even double your taxes. Her tax plan is a disaster. And she can say all she wants about college tuition, and I'm a big proponent. We're going to do a lot of things for college tuition, but the rest of the public's going to be paying for it. We will have a massive, massive tax increase under Hillary Clinton's plan. But I'd like to start off where we left, because when I said Japan and Germany, and I'm not to single them out, but South Korea, these are very rich, powerful countries. Saudi Arabia, nothing but money. We protect Saudi Arabia. Why aren't they paying? She immediately, when she heard this, I questioned it. And I questioned NATO. Why aren't the NATO questioned? Why aren't they paying? Because they weren't paying. Since I did this was a year ago, all of a sudden they're paying. And I've been given a lot of credit for it. All of a sudden they're starting to pay up. They have to pay up. We're protecting people. They have to pay up. And I'm a big fan of NATO, but they have to pay up. She comes out and said, we love our allies. We think our allies are great. Well, it's awfully hard to get them to pay up when you have somebody saying, we think how great they are. We have to tell Japan in a very nice way. We have to tell Germany, all of these countries, South Korea, we have to say, you have to help us out. We have, during his regime, during President Obama's regime, we've doubled our national debt. We're up to $20 trillion. So my plan, we're going to renegotiate trade deals. We're going to have a lot of free trade. We're going to have free trade, more free trade than we have right now. But we have horrible deals. Our jobs are being taken out by the deal that her husband signed, NAFTA, one of the worst deals ever. Our jobs are being sucked out of our economy. You look at all of the places that I just left. You go to Pennsylvania, you go to Ohio, you go to Florida, you go to any of them. You go upstate New York. Our jobs have fled to Mexico and other places. We're bringing our jobs back. I am going to renegotiate NAFTA. And if I can't make a great deal, then we're going to terminate NAFTA and we're going to create new deals. We're going to have trade, but we're going to terminate it. We're going to make a great trade deal. And if we can't, we're going to do it. We're going to go a separate way, because it has been a disaster. We are going to cut taxes massively. We're going to cut business taxes massively. They're going to start hiring people. We're going to bring the $2.5 trillion that's offshore back into the country. We are going to start the engine rolling again, because right now our country is dying at 1% GDP.
Well, let me translate that if I can, Chris, because
you can't.
The fact is he's going to advocate for the largest tax cuts we've ever seen, 3 times more than the tax cuts under the Bush administration. I have said repeatedly throughout this campaign, I will not raise taxes on anyone making $250,000 or less. I also will not add a penny to the debt. I have costed out what I'm going to do. He will, through his massive tax cuts, add $20 trillion to the debt. Well, he mentioned the debt. We know how to get control of the debt. When my husband was president, we went from a $300 billion deficit to a $200 billion surplus, and we were actually on the path to eliminating the national debt. When President Obama came into office, he inherited the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression. He has cut the deficit by 2/3. So, yes, one of the ways you go after the debt, one of the ways you create jobs is by investing in people. So I do have investments in new jobs, investments in education, skill training, and the opportunities for people to get ahead and stay ahead. That's the kind of approach that will work. Cutting taxes on the wealthy, we've tried that. It has not worked the way that it has been
Secretary
promised.
Clinton, I want to pursue your plan because in many ways it is similar to the Obama stimulus plan in 2009, which has led to the slowest GDP growth since 1949.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. You told me in July when we spoke that the problem is that President Obama didn't get to do enough in what he was trying to do with this stimulus. So is your plan basically even more of the Obama stimulus?
Well, it's a combination, Chris. And let me say that when you inherit the level of economic catastrophe that President Obama inherited, it was a real touch-and-go situation. I was in the Senate before I became Secretary of State. I've never seen people as physically distraught as the Bush administration team was because of what was happening to the economy. I personally believe that the steps that President Obama took saved the economy. He doesn't get the credit he deserves for taking some very hard positions. But it was a terrible recession. So now we've dug ourselves out of it. We're standing, but we're not yet running. So what I am proposing is that we invest from the middle out and the ground up, not the top down. That is not going to work. That's why what I have put forward doesn't add a penny to the debt, but it is the kind of approach that will enable more people to take those new jobs, higher paying jobs. We're beginning to see some increase in incomes, and we certainly have had a long string of increasing jobs. We've got to do more to get the whole economy moving, and that's what I believe I will be able to do.
Mr. Trump, even conservative economists who have looked at your plan say that the numbers don't add up, that your idea, and you've talked about 25 million jobs created, 4%
over a 10-year period
growth, is unrealistic. And they say, you talk a lot about growing the energy industry, they say with oil prices as low as they are right now, that's unrealistic as well. Your response, sir?
So I just left some high representatives of India. They're growing at 8%. China is growing at 7%, and that for them is a catastrophically low number. We are growing. Our last report came out, and it's right around the 1% level, and I think it's going down. Last week, as you know, at the end of last week, they came out with an anemic jobs report, a terrible jobs report. In fact, I said, is that the last jobs report before the election? Because if it is, I should win easily. It was so bad. The report was so bad. Look, our country is stagnant. We've lost our jobs. We've lost our businesses. We're not making things anymore, relatively speaking. Our product is pouring in from China, pouring in from Vietnam, pouring in from all over the world. I've visited so many communities. This has been such an incredible education for me, Chris. I've gotten to know so many. I've developed so many friends over the last year, and they cry when they see what's happened. I passed factories that were thriving 20, 25 years ago, and because of the bill that her husband signed and she blessed 100%, it is just horrible what's happened to these people in these communities. Now, she can say that her husband did well, but boy, did they suffer as NAFTA kicked in, because it didn't really kick in very much, but it kicked in after they left. Boy, did they suffer. That was one of the worst things that's ever been signed by our country. Now she wants to sign Trans-Pacific Partnership, and she wants it. She lied when she said she didn't call it the gold standard in one of the debates. She totally lied. She did call it the gold standard, and they actually fact-checked, and they said I was right. I was so honored.
I want to give you a chance to briefly speak to that, and then I want to pivot to 1/6 of the economy, which is Obamacare. But go ahead, briefly.
First, let me say, number one, when I saw the final agreement for TPP, I said I was against it. It didn't meet my tests. I've had the same tests. Does it create jobs, raise incomes, and further our national security? I'm against it now. I'll be against it after the election. I'll be against it when I'm president. There's only one of us on this stage who's actually shipped jobs to Mexico, because that's Donald. He's shipped jobs to 12 countries, including Mexico. But he mentioned China. And, you know, one of the biggest problems we have with China is the illegal dumping of steel and aluminum into our markets. I have fought against that as a senator. I've stood up against it as Secretary of State. Donald has bought Chinese steel and aluminum. In fact, the Trump hotel right here in Las Vegas was made with Chinese steel. So he goes around with crocodile tears about how terrible it is, but he has given jobs to Chinese steel workers, not American steel workers.
Mr. Trump?
That's the kind of approach that is just not going to work. We're going to pull the country together. We're going to have trade agreements that we enforce. That's why I'm going to have a trade prosecutor for the first time in history. And we're going to enforce those agreements. And we're going to look for businesses to help us by buying American products.
I ask a simple question. She's been doing this for 30 years. Why the hell didn't you do it over the last 15, 20 years? You were very much involved. Excuse me, my turn. You were very much involved in every aspect of this country, very much. And you do have experience. I'd say the one thing you have over me is experience, but it's bad experience because what you've done has turned out badly. For 30 years, you've been in a position to help. And if you say that I use steel or I use something else, I make it impossible for me to do that. I wouldn't mind. The problem is you talk, but you don't get anything done, Hillary. You don't. Just like when you ran the State Department, $6 billion was missing. How do you miss $6 billion? You ran the State Department. $6 billion was either stolen, they don't know. It's gone. $6 billion. If you become president, this country is going to be in some mess, believe me.
Well, first of all, what he just said about the State Department is not only untrue, it's been debunked numerous times. But I think it's really an important issue. He raised the 30 years of experience. So let me just talk briefly about that. You know, back in the 1970s, I worked for the Children's Defense Fund, and I was taking on discrimination against African-American kids in schools. He was getting sued by the Justice Department for racial discrimination in his apartment buildings. In the 1980s, I was working to reform the schools in Arkansas. He was borrowing $14 million from his father to start his businesses. In the 1990s, I went to Beijing, and I said women's rights are human rights. He insulted a former Miss Universe, Alicia Machado, called her an eating machine. And on the day when I was in the Situation Room monitoring the raid that brought Osama bin Laden to justice, he was hosting the Celebrity Apprentice. So I'm happy to compare my 30 years of experience, what I've done for this country, trying to help in every way I could, especially kids and families, get ahead and stay ahead, with your 30 years, and I'll let the American people make that decision.
Well, I think I did a much better job. I built a massive company, a great company, some of the greatest assets anywhere in the world, worth many, many billions of dollars. I started with a $1 million loan. I agree with that. It's a $1 million loan, but I built a phenomenal company. And if we could run our country the way I've run my company, we would have a country that you would be so proud of. You would even be proud of it. And frankly, when you look at her real record, take a look at Syria, take a look at the migration, take a look at Libya, take a look at Iraq. She gave us ISIS because her and Obama created this huge vacuum. And a small group came out of that huge vacuum because we should have never been in Iraq, but once we were there, we should have never got out the way they wanted to get out. She gave us ISIS as sure as you are sitting there. And what happened is now ISIS is in 32 countries. And now I listen how she's going to get rid of ISIS. She's going to get rid of nobody.
All right, we are going to get to foreign hotspots in a few moments, but the next segment is fitness to be president of the United States. Mr. Trump, at the last debate, you said your talk about grabbing women was just that, talk, and that you'd never actually done it. And since then, as we all know, 9 women have come forward and said that you either groped them or kissed them without their consent. Why would so many different women from so many different circumstances over so many different years, why would they all in this last couple of weeks make up, you deny this, why would they all make up these stories? And since this is a question for both of you, Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump says what your husband did and that you defended was even worse. Mr. Trump, you go first.
Well, first of all, those stories have been largely debunked. Those people, I don't know those people. I have a feeling how they came. I believe it was her campaign that did it. Just like if you look at what came out today on the clips, where I was wondering what happened with my rally in Chicago and other rallies where we had such violence. She's the one in Obama that caused the violence. They hired people They paid them $1,500, and they're on tape saying, be violent, cause fights, do bad things. I would say the only way, because those stories are all totally false. I have to say that. And I didn't even apologize to my wife, who's sitting right here, because I didn't do anything. I didn't know any of these women. I didn't see these women. These women, the woman on the plane, the woman, I think they want either fame or her campaign did it. And I think it's her campaign, because when I saw what they did, which is a criminal act, by the way, where they're telling people to go out and start fistfights and start violence. And I'll tell you what, in particular in Chicago, people were hurt and people could have been killed in that riot. And that was now all on tape, started by her. I believe, Chris, that she got these people to step forward. If it wasn't, they get their 10 minutes of fame. But they were all totally, it was all fiction. It was lies and it was fiction.
Well,
Secretary Clinton.
At the last debate, we heard Donald talking about what he did to women. And after that, a number of women have come forward saying that's exactly what he did to them. Now, what was his response? Well, he held a number of big rallies where he said that he could not possibly have done those things to those women because they were not attractive enough for
I did not
them
say
to be
that.
assaulted.
I did not say that.
In fact, he went on to say...
Her 2 minutes, sir, her 2 minutes.
But did not say that.
It's her 2 minutes.
He went on to say, look at her. I don't think so. About another woman, he said, that wouldn't be my first choice. He attacked the woman reporter writing the story, called her disgusting, as he has called a number of women during this campaign. You know, Donald thinks belittling women makes him bigger. He goes after their dignity, their self-worth, and I don't think there is a woman anywhere who doesn't know what that feels like. So we now know what Donald thinks and what he says and how he acts toward women. That's who Donald is. I think it's really up to all of us to demonstrate who we are and who our country is, and to stand up and be very clear about what we expect from our next president, how we want to bring our country together, where we don't want to have the kind of pitting of people one against the other, where instead we celebrate our diversity, we lift people up, and we make our country even greater. America is great because America is good. And it really is up to all of us to make that true now and in the future, and particularly for our children and our grandchildren.
Mr. Trump.
Nobody has more respect for women than I do. Nobody. Nobody has more respect.
Please, everybody.
And frankly, those stories have been largely debunked. And I really want to just talk about something slightly different. She mentions this, which is all fiction, all fictionalized, probably or possibly started by her and her very sleazy campaign. But I will tell you, what isn't fictionalized are her emails, where she destroyed 33,000 emails criminally, after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress. What happened to the FBI? I don't know. We have a great general, four-star general, today, you read it in all the papers, going to potentially serve 5 years in jail for lying to the FBI. One lie. She's lied hundreds of times to the people, to Congress, and to the FBI. He's going to probably go to jail. This is a four-star general, and she gets away with it, and she can run for the presidency of the United States. That's really what you should be talking about, not fiction, where somebody wants fame or where they come out of her crooked campaign.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, every time Donald is pushed on something which is obviously uncomfortable, like what these women are saying, he immediately goes to denying responsibility. And it's not just about women. He never apologizes or says he's sorry for anything. So we know what he has said and what he's done to women. But he also went after a disabled reporter, mocked and mimicked him on national television. He went after Mr. and Mrs. Khan, the parents of a young man who died serving our country, a Gold Star family because of their religion. He went after John McCain, a prisoner of war, said he prefers people who aren't captured. He went after a federal judge born in Indiana, but who Donald said couldn't be trusted to try the fraud and racketeering case against Trump University because his parents were Mexican. So it's not one thing. This is a pattern of divisiveness, of a very dark and in many ways dangerous vision of our country, where he incites violence, where he applauds people who are pushing and pulling and punching at his rallies. That is not who America is. And I hope that as we move in the last weeks of this campaign, more and more people will understand what's at stake in this election. It really does come down to what kind of country we are going to have.
So sad when she talks about violence at my rallies, and she caused the violence. It's on tape. The other things are false, but honestly, I'd love to talk about getting rid of ISIS, and I'd love to talk about other things.
Okay.
But those other charges, as she knows, are false.
In this bucket about fitness to be president, there's been a lot of developments over the last 10 days since the last debate. I'd like to ask you about them. These are questions that the American people have. Secretary Clinton, during your 2009 Senate confirmation hearing, you promised to avoid even the appearance of a conflict of interest with your dealing with the Clinton Foundation while you were Secretary of State. But emails show that donors got special access to you. Those seeking grants for Haiti relief were considered separately from non-donors, and some of those donors got government contracts, taxpayer money. Can you really say that you kept your pledge to that Senate committee? And why isn't what happened and what went on between you and the Clinton Foundation, why isn't it what Mr. Trump calls pay to play?
Well, everything I did as Secretary of State was in furtherance of our country's interests and our values. The State Department has said that. I think that's been proven. But I am happy. In fact, I'm thrilled to talk about the Clinton Foundation because it is a world-renowned charity. And I am so proud of the work that it does. You know, I could talk for the rest of the debate. I know I don't have the time to do that. But just briefly, the Clinton Foundation made it possible for 11 million people around the world with HIV/AIDS to afford treatment. And that's about half of all the people in the world who are getting treatment. In partnership with the American Health Association, we have made environments in schools healthier for kids,
Secretary
including
Clinton,
healthier
respectfully, this is an open discussion.
Well, it is an open discussion.
I understand, and the specific question went to pay for play. Do you want to talk about that?
But there is no evidence. But there is a lot of evidence about the very good work
and it's a criminal enterprise, and so many people know it. It's a criminal enterprise. Saudi Arabia giving $25 million, Qatar, all of these countries. You talk about women and women's rights. So these are people that push gays off buildings. These are people that kill women and treat women horribly, and yet you take their money. So I'd like to ask you right now, why don't you give back the money that you've taken from certain countries that treat certain groups of people so horribly? Why don't you give back the money? I think it would be a great gesture, because she takes a tremendous amount of money, and you take a look at the people of Haiti. I was at a little Haiti the other day in Florida, and I want to tell you, they hate the Clintons, because what's happened in Haiti with the Clinton Foundation is a disgrace. And you know it, and they know it, and everybody knows
Secretary
it.
Clinton.
Well, very quickly, we at the Clinton Foundation spend 90% of all the money that is donated on behalf of programs of people around the world and in our own country. I'm very proud of that. We have the highest rating from the watchdogs that follow foundations. And I'd be happy to compare what we do with the Trump Foundation, which took money from other people and bought a 6-foot portrait of Donald. I mean, who does that? It just was astonishing. But when it comes to Haiti, Haiti is the poorest country in our hemisphere. The earthquake and the hurricanes, it has devastated Haiti. Bill and I have been involved in trying to help Haiti for many years. The Clinton Foundation raised $30 million to help Haiti after the catastrophic earthquake. And all of the terrible problems the people there had. We've done things to help small businesses, agriculture, and so much else. And we're going to keep working to help Haiti because it's an important part of the American
They don't want you to help them anymore. I'd like to mention one thing. Trump Foundation, small foundation. People contribute. I contribute. The money goes 100% goes to different charities, including a lot of military. I don't get anything. I don't buy boats. I don't buy planes. What happens is the money goes out.
Wasn't some of the money used to settle your lawsuit, sir?
No, it was, we put up the American flag, and that's it. They put up the American flag. We fought for the right in Palm Beach to put up the American flag.
There was a penalty that was imposed by Palm Beach County, and the money came from your foundation.
And by the way, the money
yourself,
went to Fisher House, where they build houses. The money that you're talking about went to Fisher House, where they build houses for veterans and disabled.
I want to get into one last...
But of course, there's no way we can know whether any of that is true because he hasn't released his tax returns. He is the first candidate ever to run for president in the last 40-plus years who has not released his tax returns. So everything he says about charity or anything else, we can't prove it. You can look at our tax returns. We've got them all out there. But what is really troubling is that we learned in the last debate he has not paid a penny in federal income tax. And we were talking about immigrants a few minutes ago, Chris. You know, half of all immigrants, undocumented immigrants in our country, actually pay federal income tax. So we have undocumented immigrants in America who are paying more federal income tax than a billionaire. I find that
let me just tell you very
astonishing.
Simply, we're entitled, because of the laws that people like her pass, to take massive amounts of depreciation and other charges, and we do it. And all of her donors, just about all of them, I know Buffett took hundreds of millions of dollars, George Soros, took hundreds of millions of dollars. Let me just explain. All of her donors, most of her donors have done the same thing as I did.
Okay.
Well,
and you know what she should have done?
Folks, we heard
and
this.
You know, Hillary, what you should have done? You should have changed the law when you were a United States Senator. If you don't like it. Because your donors and your special interests are doing the same thing as I do, except even more so.
Well,
you should have changed the law, but you won't change the law because you take in so much money. I mean, I sat in my apartment today on a very beautiful hotel down the street, known as Trump.
Made with Chinese steel.
But I will tell you, I sat there watching ad after ad after ad, false ad, all paid for by your friends on Wall Street that gave so much money because they know you're going to protect them. And frankly, you should have changed the laws. If you don't like what I did, you should have changed the laws.
Mr. Trump, I want to ask you about one last question in this topic. You have been warning at rallies recently that this election is rigged and that Hillary Clinton is in the process of trying to steal it from you. Your running mate, Governor Pence, pledged on Sunday that he and you, his words, will absolutely accept the result of this election. Today, your daughter Ivanka said the same thing. I want to ask you here on the stage tonight, do you make the same commitment that you will absolutely, sir, that you will absolutely accept the result of this election?
I will look at it at the time. I'm not looking at anything now. I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing. The New York Times actually wrote an article about it that they don't even care. It's so dishonest, and they've poisoned the minds of the voters. But unfortunately for them, I think the voters are seeing through it. I think they're going to see through it. We'll find out on November 8th, but I think they're going to see through it.
But, sir, there's
if you look, excuse me, Chris, if you look at your voter rolls, you will see millions of people that are registered to vote. Millions. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from Pew Report and other places. Millions of people that are registered to vote that shouldn't be registered to vote. So let me just give you one other thing. So I talk about the corrupt media. I talk about the millions of people. Tell you one other thing. She shouldn't be allowed to run. She's guilty of a very, very serious crime. She should not be allowed to run. And just in that respect, I say it's rigged because she should never, Chris, she should never have been allowed to run for the presidency based on what she did with emails and so many other things.
But, sir, there is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner, not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit to that principle?
What I'm saying is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris, let me respond to that because that's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. The FBI conducted a year-long investigation into my emails. They concluded there was no case. He said the FBI was rigged. He lost the Iowa caucus. He lost the Wisconsin primary. He said the Republican primary was rigged against him. Then Trump University gets sued for fraud and racketeering. He claims the court system and the federal judge is rigged against him. There was even a time when he didn't get an Emmy for his TV program 3 years in a row, and he started tweeting that the Emmys were rigged against him.
Should have gotten it.
This is a mindset. This is how Donald thinks. And it's funny, but it's also really troubling.
Okay.
Now, that is not the way our democracy works. We've been around for 240 years. We've had free and fair elections. We've accepted the outcomes when we may not have liked them. And that is what must be expected of anyone standing on a debate stage during a general election. You know, President Obama said the other day, when you're whining before the game is even finished, it just shows you're not up to doing the job. And let's be clear about what he is saying and what that means. He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled that somebody who is the nominee of one of our two major parties would take that kind of position.
I think what the FBI did and what the Department of Justice did, including meeting with her husband, the Attorney General, in the back of an airplane on the tarmac in Arizona, I think it's disgraceful. I think it's a disgrace.
All right.
I think we've never had a situation so bad.
Hold on, folks. This doesn't do any good for anyone. Let's please continue the debate, and let's move on to the subject of foreign hotspots. The Iraqi offensive to take back Mosul has begun. If they are successful in pushing ISIS out of that city and out of all of Iraq, the question then becomes, what happens the day after? And that's something that whoever of you ends up as president is going to have to confront. Will you put U.S. troops into that vacuum to make sure that ISIS doesn't come back or isn't replaced by something even worse? Secretary Clinton, you go first in this segment. You have 2 minutes.
Well, I am encouraged that there is an effort led by the Iraqi army, supported by Kurdish forces, and also given the help and advice from the number of special forces and other Americans on the ground. But I will not support putting American soldiers into Iraq as an occupying force. I don't think that is in our interests, and I don't think that would be smart to do. In fact, Chris, I think that would be a big red flag waving for ISIS to reconstitute itself. The goal here is to take back Mosul. It's going to be a hard fight. I've got no illusions about that. And then continue to press into Syria to begin to take back and move on Raqqa, which is the ISIS headquarters. I am hopeful that the hard work that American military advisors have done will pay off, and that we will see a really successful military operation. But we know we've got lots of work to do. Syria will remain a hotbed of terrorism as long as the civil war, aided and abetted by the Iranians and the Russians, continue. So I have said, look, we need to keep our eye on ISIS. That's why I want to have an intelligence surge that protects us here at home, why we have to go after them from the air, on the ground, online, why we have to make sure here at home we don't let terrorists buy weapons. If you're too dangerous to fly, you're too dangerous to buy a gun. And I'm going to continue to push for a no-fly zone and safe havens within Syria, not only to help protect the Syrians and prevent the constant outflow of refugees, but to frankly gain some leverage on both the Syrian government and the Russians so that perhaps we can have the kind of serious negotiation necessary to bring the conflict to an end and go forward on a political track.
Mr. Trump, same question. If we are able to push ISIS out of Mosul and out of Iraq, would you be willing to put U.S. troops in there to prevent their return or something else?
Let me tell you, Mosul's so sad. We had Mosul. But when she left, when she took everybody out, we lost Mosul. Now we're fighting again to get Mosul. The problem with Mosul and what they wanted to do is they wanted to get the leaders of ISIS who they felt were in Mosul. About 3 months ago, I started reading that they want to get the leaders and they're going to attack Mosul. Whatever happened to the element of surprise? Okay? We announced we're going after Mosul. I've been reading about going after Mosul now for about, how long is it, Hillary? 3 months? These people have all left. They've all left. The element of surprise. Douglas, MacArthur, George Patton, spinning in their graves when they see the stupidity of our country. So we're now fighting for Mosul that we had. All she had to do is stay there. Now we're going in to get it. But you know who the big winner in Mosul is going to be after we eventually get it? And the only reason they did it is because she's running for the office of president. And they want to look tough. They want to look good. He violated the red line in the sand. And he made so many mistakes, made all mistakes. That's why we have the Great Migration. But she wanted to look good for the election. So they're going in. But who's going to get Mosul, really? We'll take Mosul eventually. By the way, if you look at what's happening, much tougher than they thought. Much, much tougher, much more dangerous, going to be more deaths than they thought. But the leaders that we wanted to get are all gone because they're smart. They say, what do we need this for? So Mosul is going to be a wonderful thing, and Iran should write us a letter of thank you, just like the really stupid, the stupidest deal of all time, a deal that's going to give Iran absolutely nuclear weapons. Iran should write us yet another letter saying thank you very much. Because Iran, as I said many years ago, Iran is taking over Iraq, something they've wanted to do forever, but we've made it so easy for them. So we're now going to take Mosul, and you know who's going to be the beneficiary? Iran. Boy, are they making, I mean, they are outsmarting. Look, you're not there. You might be involved in that decision, but you were there when you took everybody out of Mosul and out of Iraq. You shouldn't have been in Iraq, but you did vote for it. You shouldn't have been in Iraq, but once you were in Iraq, you should have never left the way. The point is, the big winner is going to be Iran.
Well, you know, once again, Donald is implying that he didn't support the invasion of Iraq. I said it was a mistake. I've said that years ago. He has consistently denied what is a very clear fact, that before the invasion, he supported it. And, you know, I just want everybody to go Google it. Google Donald Trump, Iraq, and you will see the dozens of sources which verify that he was for the invasion of Iraq. And you can actually hear the audio of him saying that. Now, why does that matter? Well, it matters because he has not told the truth about that position. I guess he believes it makes him look better now to contrast with me because I did vote for it. But what's really important here is to understand all the interplay. Mosul is a Sunni city. Mosul is on the border of Syria. And yes, we do need to go after Baghdadi, and just like we went after bin Laden while you were doing Celebrity Apprentice, and we brought him to justice. We need to go after the leadership, but we need to get rid of them, get rid of their fighters. They're estimated several thousand fighters in Mosul. They've been digging underground. They've been prepared to defend. It's going to be tough fighting, but I think we can take back Mosul, and then we can move on into Syria and take back Raqqa. This is what we have to do. I'm just amazed that he seems to think that the Iraqi government and our allies and everybody else launched the attack on Mosul to help me in this election, but that's how Donald thinks, you know. He always is looking for some
Chris, we don't gain anything.
He has all these
Iran is taking over Iraq.
Secretary Clinton.
Iran is taking over Iraq. We don't gain
Secretary Clinton.
We would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Wait. Secretary Clinton, it's an open discussion.
Secretary, we would have gained if they did it by surprise.
Secretary, please let Mr. Trump speak.
He's unfit, and he proves it every time
you
he
are
talks.
the one that's unfit. You know, WikiLeaks just actually came out. John Podesta said some horrible things about you, and boy, was he right. He said some beauties. And, you know, Bernie Sanders, he said you have bad judgment. You do. And if you think that going into Mosul, after we let the world know we're going in, and all of the people that we really wanted, the leaders, they're all gone. If you think that was good, than you do. Now, John Podesta said you have terrible instincts. Bernie Sanders said you have bad judgment. I agree with both.
Well, you should ask Bernie Sanders who he's supporting for president. And he has said,
which is
as
a big
he has
mistake,
campaigned for me around the country, you are the most dangerous person to run for president in the modern history of America. I think he's right.
Let's turn to Aleppo. Mr. Trump, in the last debate, you were both asked about the situation in the Syrian city of Aleppo, and I want to follow up on that because you said several things in that debate which were not true, sir. You said that Aleppo has basically fallen. In fact, there are...
It's a catastrophe.
It is a catastrophe, but there are a quarter of...
Have you seen it? Have you seen it?
Sir,
have you seen what's happened to Aleppo?
If I might finish my question.
Okay, so it hasn't fallen. Take a look at it.
Well, there are 250,000 people still living there and being slaughtered.
That's right.
You also
and they are being slaughtered because of bad decisions.
If I may just finish here. And you also said that that Syria and Russia are busy fighting ISIS. In fact, they have been the ones who've been bombing and shelling eastern Aleppo, and they just announced a humanitarian pause, in effect admitting that they have been bombing and shelling Aleppo. Would you like to clear that up, sir?
Well, Aleppo is a disaster. It's a humanitarian nightmare, but it has fallen from any standpoint. I mean, what do you need, a signed document? Take a look at Aleppo. It is so sad when you see what's happened. And a lot of this is because of Hillary Clinton, because what's happened is by fighting Assad, who turned out to be a lot tougher than she thought, and now she's going to say, oh, he loves Assad. He's just much tougher and much smarter than her and Obama. And everyone thought he was gone 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He aligned with Russia. He now also aligned with Iran, who we made very powerful. We gave them $150 billion back. We give them $1.7 billion in cash. I mean, cash, bundles of cash as big as this stage. We gave them $1.7 billion. Now, they have he has aligned with Russia and with Iran. They don't want ISIS, but they have other things because we're backing rebels. We don't know who the rebels are. We're giving them lots of money, lots of everything. We don't know who the rebels are. And when and if, and it's not going to happen because you have Russia and you have Iran now, but if they ever did overthrow Assad, you might end up with as bad as Assad is, and he's a bad guy. But you may very well end up with worse than Assad. If she did nothing, we'd be in much better shape. And this is what's caused the Great Migration, where she's taken in tens of thousands of Syrian refugees who probably, in many cases, not probably, who are definitely, in many cases, ISIS aligned. And we now have them in our country. And wait till you see, this is going to be the great Trojan horse. And wait till you see what happens in the coming years. Lots of luck, Hillary. Thanks a lot for doing a great job.
Secretary Clinton, you have talked about, and in the last debate and again today, that you would impose a no-fly zone to try to protect the people of Aleppo and to stop the killing there. President Obama has refused to do that because he fears it's going to draw us closer or deeper into the conflict. And General Joseph Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, says, you impose a no-fly zone, chances are you're going to get into a war, his words, with Syria and Russia. So the question I have is, if you impose a no-fly zone, first of all, how do you respond to their concerns? Secondly, if you impose a no-fly zone and a Russian plane violates that, does President Clinton shoot that plane down?
Well, Chris, first of all, I think a no-fly zone could save lives and could hasten the end of the conflict. I am well aware of the really legitimate concerns that you have expressed from both the president and the general. This would not be done just on the first day. This would take a lot of negotiation. It would also take making it clear to the Russians and the Syrians that our purpose here was to provide safe zones on the ground. We've had millions of people leave Syria, and those millions of people inside Syria who've been dislocated. So I think we could strike a deal and make it very clear to the Russians and the Syrians that this was something that we believed was in the best interests of the people on the ground in Syria. It would help us with our fight against ISIS. But I want to respond to what Donald said about refugees. He's made these claims repeatedly. I am not going to let anyone into this country who is not vetted, who we do not have confidence in, but I am not going to slam the door on women and children. That picture of that little 4-year-old boy in Aleppo with the blood coming down his face while he sat in an ambulance is haunting. And so we are going to do very careful, thorough vetting. That does not solve our internal challenges with ISIS and our need to stop radicalization, to work with American Muslim communities who are on the front lines to identify and prevent attacks. In fact, the killer of the dozens of people at the nightclub in Orlando, the Pulse nightclub, was born in Queens, the same place Donald was born. So let's be clear about what the threat is and how we are best going to be able to meet it. And yes, some of that threat emanates from over in Syria and Iraq, and we've got to keep fighting, and I will defeat ISIS. And some of it is we have to up our game and be much smarter here
Folks,
at home.
I want to get into our final segment.
But I just have to, it's so
quick.
ridiculous what she will defeat ISIS. We should have never let ISIS happen in the first place. And right now they're in 32 countries.
Okay.
You should have never. Wait 1 second. They had a ceasefire 3 weeks ago. A ceasefire, United States, Russia, Syria. And during the ceasefire, Russia took over vast swatches of land. And then they said, we don't want the ceasefire anymore. We are so outplayed on missiles, on ceasefires. They are outplayed. Now, she wasn't there. I assume she had nothing to do with it. But our country is so outplayed by Putin and Assad and, by the way, and by Iran. Nobody can believe how stupid our leadership is.
Mr. Trump, Secretary Clinton, no, we need to move on to our final segment, and that is the national debt, which has not been discussed until tonight. Our national debt as a share of the economy, our GDP, is now 77%. That's the highest since just after World War II. But the nonpartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says, Secretary Clinton, under your plan, debt would rise to 86% of GDP over the next 10 years. Mr. Trump, under your plan, they say it would rise to 105% of GDP over the next 10 years. Question is, why are both of you ignoring this problem? Mr. Trump, you go first.
Well, I say they're wrong because I'm going to create tremendous jobs. And we're bringing GDP from really 1%, which is what it is now. And if she got in, it'll be less than zero. But we're bringing it from 1% up to 4%. And I actually think we can go higher than 4%. I think you can go to 5 or 6%. And if we do, you don't have to bother asking your question because we have a tremendous machine. We will have created a tremendous economic machine once again. To do that, we're taking back jobs. We're not going to let our companies be raided by other countries where we lose all our jobs. We don't make our product anymore. It's very sad. But I'm going to create the kind of a country that we were from the standpoint of industry. We used to be there. We've given it up. We've become very, very sloppy. We've had people that are political hacks making the biggest deals in the world, bigger than companies. You take these big companies, these trade deals are far bigger than these companies. And yet we don't use our great leaders, many of whom back me and many of whom back Hillary, I must say. But we don't use those people. Those are the people, these are the greatest negotiators in the world. We have the greatest business people in the world. We have to use them to negotiate our trade deals. We use political hacks. We use people that get the position because they made a campaign contribution. And they're dealing with China and people that are very much smarter than they are. So we have to use our great people. But with that being said, we will create an economic machine, the likes of which we haven't seen in many decades. And people, Chris, will again go back to work, and they'll make a lot of money, and we'll have companies that will grow and expand and start from new.
Secretary Clinton.
Well, first, when I hear Donald talk like that and know that his slogan is "Make America Great Again," I wonder when he thought America was great. And before he rushes and says, you know, before you and President Obama were there, I think it's important to recognize that he has been criticizing our government for decades. You know, back in 1987, he took out a $100,000 ad in the New York Times during the time when President Reagan was president and basically said exactly what he just said now, that we were the laughing stock of the world. He was criticizing President Reagan. This is the way Donald thinks about himself, puts himself into, the middle and says, I alone can fix it, as he said on the convention stage. But if you look at the debt, which is the issue you asked about, Chris, I pay for everything I'm proposing. I do not add a penny to the national debt. I take that very seriously because I do think it's one of the issues we've got to come to grips with. So when I talk about how we're going to pay for education, how we're going to invest in infrastructure, how we're going to get the cost of prescription drugs down, and a lot of the other issues that people talk to me about all the time, I've made it very clear we are going where the money is. We are going to ask the wealthy and corporations to pay their fair share. And there is no evidence whatsoever that that will slow down or diminish our growth. In fact, I think just the opposite. We'll have what economists call middle-out growth. We've got to get back to rebuilding the middle class, the families of America. That's where growth will come from. That's why I want to invest in you. I want to invest in your family. And I think that's the smartest way to grow the economy, to make the economy fairer. And we just have a big disagreement about this. It may be because of our experiences. He started off with his dad as a millionaire. I started off with my dad as a small businessman.
We've heard this before.
I think it's, it's a difference that affects how we see the world and what we want to do with the economy.
Time.
Thank you, Hillary. Could I just respond?
Well, no.
Because
sir,
I did disagree with Ronald Reagan very strongly on trade. I disagreed with him. We should have been much tougher on trade even then. I've been waiting for years. Nobody does it right. And frankly, now we're going to do it right.
All right. The one last area I want to get into with you in this debate is the fact that the biggest driver of our debt is entitlements, which is 60% of all federal spending. Now, the Committee for Responsible Federal Budget has looked at both of your plans, and they say neither of you has a serious plan that is going to solve the fact that Medicare is going to run out of money in the 2020s, Social Security is going to run out of money in the 2030s, and at that time, recipients are going to take huge cuts in their benefits. So, in effect, the final question I want to ask you in this regard is, and let me start with you, Mr. Trump, would President Trump make a deal to save Medicare and Social Security that included both tax increases and benefit cuts, in effect, a grand bargain on entitlements?
I'm cutting taxes. We're going to grow the economy. It's going to grow at a record rate.
But that's not going to help on entitlements.
It's going to totally help you. And one thing we have to do, repeal and replace the disaster known as Obamacare. It's destroying our country. It's destroying our businesses, our small business, and our big businesses. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare. You take a look at the kind of numbers that will cost us in the year 17. It is a disaster if we don't repeal and replace. Now, it's probably going to die of its own weight, but Obamacare has to go. The premiums are going up 60, 70, 80%. Next year, they're going to go up over 100%. And I'm really glad that the premiums have started. At least the people see what's happening, because she wants to keep Obamacare and she wants to make it even worse. And it can't get any worse. Bad health care at the most expensive price. We have to repeal and replace Obamacare.
And Secretary Clinton, same question, because at this point, Social Security and Medicare are going to run out. The trust funds are going to run out of money. Will you, as president, will you consider a grand bargain, a deal that includes both tax increases and benefit cuts to try to save both programs?
Well, Chris, I am on record as saying that we need to put more money into the Social Security Trust Fund. That's part of my commitment to raise taxes on the wealthy. My Social Security payroll contribution will go up, as will Donald's, assuming he can't figure out how to get out of it. But what we want to do is to replenish the Social Security Trust Fund by making sure that we have sufficient resources. And that will come from either raising the cap and or finding other ways to get more money into it. I will not cut benefits. I want to enhance benefits for low-income workers and for women who have been disadvantaged by the current Social Security system. But what Donald is proposing with these massive tax cuts will result in a $20 trillion additional national debt. That will have dire consequences for Social Security and Medicare. And I'll say something about the Affordable Care Act, which he wants to repeal. The Affordable Care Act extended the solvency of the Medicare Trust Fund. So if he repeals it, our Medicare problem gets worse. What we need to do is go after the long-term health care drivers. We've got to get costs down, increase value, emphasize wellness. I have a plan for doing that, and I think that we will be able to get entitlement spending under control with more resources and smarter decisions.
This is the final time, probably to both of your delight, that you're going to be on the stage together in this campaign. I would like to end it on a positive note. You had not agreed to closing statements, but it seems to me in a funny way that might make it more interesting because you haven't prepared closing statements. So I'd like you each to take it. We're going to put a clock up, a minute, as the final question in the final debate to tell the American people why they should elect you to be the next president. This is another new mini segment. Secretary Clinton, it's your turn to go first.
Well, I would like to say to everyone watching tonight that I'm reaching out to all Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, because we need everybody to help make our country what it should be, to grow the economy, to make it fairer, to make it work for everyone. We need your talents, your skills, your commitment, your energy, your ambition. You know, I've been privileged to see the presidency up close. And I know the awesome responsibility of protecting our country and the incredible opportunity of working to try to make life better for all of you. I have made the cause of children and families really my life's work. That's what my mission will be in the presidency. I will stand up for families against powerful interests, against corporations. I will do everything that I can to make sure that you have good jobs with rising incomes, that your kids have good educations from preschool through college. I hope you will give me a chance to serve as your president.
Secretary Clinton, thank you. Mr. Trump?
She's raising the money from the people she wants to control. Doesn't work that way. But when I started this campaign, I started it very strongly. It's called Make America Great Again. We're going to make America great. We have a depleted military. It has to be helped, has to be fixed. We have the greatest people on earth in our military. We don't take care of our veterans. We take care of illegal immigrants, people that come into the country illegally, better than we take care of our vets. That can't happen. Our policemen and women are disrespected. We need law and order, but we need justice too. Our inner cities are a disaster. You get shot walking to the store. They have no education. They have no jobs. I will do more for African Americans and Latinos than she can ever do in 10 lifetimes. All she's done is talk to the African Americans and to the Latinos. But they get the vote, and then they come back. They say, we'll see you in 4 years. We are going to make America strong again, and we are going to make America great again, and it has to start now. We cannot take 4 more years of Barack Obama, and that's what you get when you get her.
Thank you both. Secretary Clinton, hold on just a moment, folks. Secretary Clinton, Mr. Trump, I want to thank you both for participating in all 3 of these debates. That brings to an end this year's debate sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. We want to thank the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and its students for having us. Now the decision is up to you. While millions have already voted, Election Day, November 8th, is just 20 days away. One thing everyone here can agree on, we hope you will go vote. It is one of the honors and obligations of living in this great country. Thank you, and good night.
And there you have it, the third and perhaps the most substantive debate of this campaign season. 2 very different visions for America by 2 extremely different candidates, 2 very different personalities. Chris Wallace, I think, as we predicted, deserves major kudos for keeping the candidates in line as they discussed everything from the Supreme Court, the Second Amendment, Roe v. Wade, immigration, U.S.-Russian relations, the battle for Mosul, NAFTA, Syria, the debt, entitlements, their fitness for office. But I think the headline will be tomorrow that when Donald Trump was asked if he would accept the outcome of the election, he said, I will look at it at the time. That is one thing that I think stood out, and that's what people have been talking about on social media. So let's just talk about that. Let's reintroduce our panel. Of course, we have Matt Beyer, national political correspondent. Olivier Knox is our chief Washington correspondent. Beth Myers was senior advisor to Governor Mitt Romney during the 2012 presidential campaign, and Anita Dunn is the former White House communications director to President Obama. Also, Brian Goldsmith is a political consultant. Brian's going to sort of tell us what the buzz was on social media and some of the fact-checking that went on tonight. So, you know, I thought there was an undercurrent of nastiness, but by and large, actually, this was an attempt by both candidates, thanks to Chris Wallace, to really talk about some of the major issues facing our country. What did you think, Matt?
I think you summarized it really well, Katie, that I think Chris did an excellent job of making it a pretty substantive debate. I think the headline will be, as you said, you know, that he doesn't bow to respect the will of the people as his running mate has. You know, to me, this was a little bit, you know, I would call this debate 3A and 3B. This was two different debates. We had an hour of the more subdued Donald Trump, sticking more to the speech notes, sticking more to a tone that I think he tried to project as more presidential. And then, as we've seen before in the second hour, getting a lot more emotional, a lot angrier, the tone of the debate really deteriorating very rapidly, both of them clearly really not liking each other. I think, you know, it's never over. I mean, I've been surprised many times in this campaign. I think this is the Trump show facing cancellation. This is the end of the show. This is the end of the run. I think he's now, and I think that's what the last week or two has been about. This is about this rigged election stuff is about that this is the end game for him. And I think, you know, one of the interesting lines that jumped out to me tonight, in addition to that one, and maybe not to other people, but to me it was quite interesting when he said, I look at the anemic jobs report that just came out, and I think I should easily be winning this election. I look at that, and I think, yes, you should easily be winning this election, and another Republican would be winning this election.
Well, it's
but I
sort
think
of
he
an echo of Hillary Clinton when she said, why am I not, how many points ahead? 50 points ahead of Donald Trump. It was sort of a juxtaposition.
The old Saturday Night Live line. I can't believe I'm losing to this guy. Remember?
Right?
You know, the Michael Dukakis line. That's what's happening.
But you talked about sort of the need all along for Donald Trump to prove his acceptability for people who dislike Hillary Clinton. Did he go a step further in proving his acceptability? Because I think on the face of it, he did seem to be able to talk about some of the issues in a way that seemed that he had a handle on his particular perspective on the state of the country.
Well,
Olivier.
in what Matt identified as debate 3A, I think you could make a case that he presented himself as a plausible alternative. And it went away when he said he wouldn't respect the will of the voters on election day.
So that one statement, you think, totally...
No, also calling her a nasty woman,
there were a lot of other
liar,
things, but wasn't that the moment where where the transition was complete from?
It's where we all gasped.
Yeah, right. And I think so.
Twice.
Yeah, right. And then Chris Wallace gave him a second shot, essentially, at answering the question. I know, almost saying, "I can't believe you said that. You sure you want? That's your final answer?" And it was. It turns out it was his final answer on this. I just don't think he fundamentally reshaped the race, right? I think she stuck to what she's been doing the whole time. In 3A, he was maybe a plausible candidate, but this debate didn't happen in a vacuum. It's happening with, you know, early voting. It's happening with absentee voting. It's happening with all these polling trends that we're seeing. It's happening with the last, you know, year and a half of campaigning. So I don't think he radically reshaped the race, and I think he needed to.
And what did you think, Beth? Do you think he changed any minds? Of course, I think the good question that many people have asked, like, who the heck is still undecided at this juncture? But if there is a swath of undecided voters, did Donald Trump say anything tonight that might have increased their level of comfort with him and caused them to pull the lever on November 8th?
Not from where I'm sitting. And even though there was a 3A and a 3B, I think that's a really good way for us a construct for us to look at it. There were things said in 3A, like bad hombres, that if other candidates had said that in previous years, you know, bad hombres makes binders full of women look anemic. And that we can't forget that. So yes, he seemed more normal, and there was a structure to the debate until the pivot point where that came in about an hour where he not only said once but twice that he would not respect the outcome of the election, or he might not. He'd have to see what would happen at the time.
Can we drill down on that? I mean, what is the significance of making that statement? Of course, he did refute and walk away from what Mike Pence has said, and there were a couple of things on Twitter. Here's someone who said, "There's the lead. I will look at it at the time," Trump says. I think Laura Ingraham even said, I think she tweeted that he shouldn't have made that statement. Mike Murphy said somewhere, who's a Republican consultant, but not a Donald Trump fan, said somewhere Hillary's How to Push Trump's Button squad of crafty shrinks are cheering and high-fiving each other. But when it comes to that, making that statement that we think will be incredibly significant, and certainly the headline, why is it so important, and what impact does it have? And what are the repercussions of making that statement, in your view, Anita?
You know, Katie, he has spent his entire campaign arguing that the economy is rigged, that the deck is stacked against huge swaths of the American people, and that has really been the thematic of his debate. Is they're being cheated right and left, that the politicians are cheating them, they're getting screwed over, and that he alone is kind of the person who will be their advocate, who will be their hero. You know, it may very well be that he felt he could not say anything else in this debate tonight, having opened this discussion with them, to kind of say, if I don't win, it's because this rigged system I've been telling you about, you know, that they went in and they just rigged it one last time. He may have felt he could not do that to his base of voters. But what is the significance of it? The first significance, I think, is that it really did mark a pivot point in this debate. And I have to say that I was grateful during the last 30 minutes that the Commission on Presidential Debates had not made this all about foreign policy, because if there is one area where he clearly does not know what he's talking about, is foreign policy, and it's painful to listen to him. But the second significant thing is that, you know, once again, it was violating the norm of what any candidate should say, and just stepping so far out of it, it just takes the whole presidential campaign to an ugly place. And, you know, voters in this country are just saying, get this thing over with, because it is so ugly. We talked about it before the debate, and he single-handedly took this debate to that ugly place when he said that.
Well, we've forgotten what normal discourse is. I mean, he stood up there today and said, she's a liar, which in the context of this campaign, it's like, there he goes again. In any other campaign, that would be a shocking line. You know, I'd take Anita's point and put it a slightly different way, which is, in America, you can run against the system, and you can run against the system very effectively, and it's a powerful campaign theme. Running against the democracy is a different thing. Right? That's where we get, the reason it matters is because the system and the democracy are not the same thing. Right? The system are the politicians, it's the political levers, it's the money, it's the policy. The democracy people believe very strongly in. And, you know, and also, you know, not only do people believe in it, but running against it creates a real danger, the kind of which, you know, politicians of all stripes, of all ideologies, for many, many decades, centuries, have avoided. And so, you know, I think it's quite significant.
We're going to talk about some of the rough moments for Hillary Clinton during this debate in a moment. But first, Katrina Pearson is the national campaign spokesperson for the Trump campaign, and she's here joining us in Las Vegas. Katrina, thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Katie.
I guess the first question is that the fact that Donald Trump refused to say that he would accept the outcome of the election, despite the fact that Chris Wallace gave him 2 opportunities. He said he would look at it, or I will tell you at the time. Can you just respond to that? And as Matt you probably just heard Matt talk about the fact that it's one thing to run against the system, but it's another thing to run against our democracy in general. So were you surprised when you heard that, especially given that Mike Pence and Ivanka Trump have said otherwise in recent days?
No, not at all. And just to correct the record, the United States is not a democracy. It is, in fact, a republic. And I don't know why we would expect Mr. Trump to concede an election before it occurs. Mr. Trump is simply saying, look, if she wins, great. But if it's close, he does want to contest it. He's just saying that he's not going to concede the election before it even occurs.
Well, Katrina, thank you for the history lesson about the difference between democracy and republic. I'll consult you next time I need to understand the democracy. But I'm curious, can you tell me why it being a republic makes it any different to question the legitimacy of a public vote for the presidency? We're talking electoral votes or voters. As you may know, that is what the essential difference is between a democracy and a republic. But how does that change an assault on the integrity of the system?
Well, it doesn't change it at all. I was just correcting the record. I keep hearing, at least for the last couple of weeks, everyone talking about a democracy. And in fact, the United States is a republic. And I was just making sure that your viewers knew the truth about the way this country is supposed to function.
What did you think of the quote that Donald Trump discussed, used the phrase bad hombres? Was that a mistake in your view?
No, not at all. Mr. Trump said they were bad hombres. He said this on the campaign trail before. He has spoken about this several times. And, you know, we know that a lot of people don't like what Mr. Trump says and the way he says it, but this is just him being authentic and original, and a lot of people support him for that.
What about the fact that he said that all the stories of these women who have come forward, Katrina, have been debunked? Debunked by whom?
Well, he said a lot of the stories have been debunked, mainly because we have had witnesses come forward. There have been several instances. For example, one of them's family member came forward. The witness in one of the other cases, the butler, came forward and said that these were actually false allegations, and that's what he's referring to.
So, but you think that, are you saying as his spokesperson that all these women were lying about his behavior towards them?
Well, as his spokesperson, I'm saying that Donald Trump has denied the allegations, and I take him for his word.
Katrina, he said tonight on stage that he's never even seen these women, doesn't know them. The reporter from People magazine, whose story was today corroborated by several people unrelated to the magazine, she did a story on him, interviewed him, spent time with him. How can he say he's never seen these women?
Well, there were some of them that he said he's never even heard of or never met. Not all of them. Some of them, obviously, he has met before. And again, in that case in particular, there was a witness that came forward and said it did not happen.
He also suggested that Hillary Clinton was Vladimir Putin's puppet. How so? Can you elaborate on that?
Well, he's referring to the exchanges that Hillary Clinton and Vladimir Putin have had, not to mention the 20% uranium that she, as Secretary of State, sold to Russia. Her husband received hundreds of thousands of dollars in speaking fees to Russian banks. And throughout WikiLeaks, you know, she praised being Vladimir Putin's friend.
And how would you describe his relationship with Vladimir Putin and Russia?
He doesn't know Vladimir Putin, has ever met Vladimir Putin. Again, Mr. Trump has said that Vladimir Putin has said nice things about him. Mr. Trump's number one concern is the United States and its safety, and he wants to fight ISIS. And if Russia is someone who wants to help with that matter, he wants the United States and Russia to get along, and that's the extent of their relationship.
All right. And what was the headline for you coming out of this debate?
I think the headline tonight is Donald Trump won this debate. He was very strong. He was willing and able to prosecute the case against Hillary Clinton and her record and really tell the American public what his positions are without that media filter.
How did you feel when he said you're a nasty woman towards the end of the debate? Did you think that was appropriate?
Oh, I didn't feel anything. I mean, he was just saying what he felt and that she was being very nasty to him. And she was, again, lying on stage about her positions. She does support open borders, even though she said she didn't. And she did not refute anything that came out of WikiLeaks. And I think that is also important for your viewers.
All right. Katrina Pearson. Katrina, thanks so much for talking with us tonight.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
All right. So.
I don't know why we have these campaign spokesmen. Come on, I really don't. I don't know what the, I mean, it's just, she's, you know, that's just party line and coming from a place where she doesn't actually know anything about the issues. And this is why, as a reporter, I never call press offices, because it's, I learned nothing there.
Let's talk about this.
But here there's an element of suspense, because you don't know whether what she says is what the campaign or the candidate thinks. Because on several occasions in this campaign, she's come out with forceful statements that the candidate denied on the stump, in some cases minutes later.
Yeah, that's true, right?
So there's an element of suspense there, at least.
And she is,
that makes it more interesting than usual. And
she's an official paid spokesperson for the campaign. So when you're looking to have someone reflect the views of the campaign organization.
And a civics lecturer. So that's a 2 for 1.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the challenging moments for the Clinton, for Hillary Clinton. You know, she mentioned the open borders. And when Hillary Clinton answered that question, there were some eye rolls here behind the scenes in terms of her explanation for that in that speech she gave, saying that it was really about energy policy.
It's ambiguous.
You're skeptical.
It's ambiguous from the text of the speech. It's ambiguous. She talks about a hemispheric common market, and then she does mention with energy. Now, I can't tell from the snippets whether she's actually talking, but a common market is the free flow of people, goods, and capital across borders. So that would, of course, imply at least open borders. You know, that was a little bit of an eye roll. The suggestion that she would not add a penny to the national debt. The national debt's going to grow no matter what kind of spending proposals Hillary Clinton puts forth in her first year in office, just to be completely
Well, and the
clear.
idea that she pays for her programs, which is just, again, I mean, Ian and I will disagree about this, I suspect, but to say, you know, we're going to do it by reforming a bunch of stuff is not, to me, the same as saying, you know, I can tell you how I'm going to pay for my programs. I'm not a person who believes you have to find every penny you're going to spend on the budget, but then you can't stand up, as Olivier says, and so they're not going to add to the debt. You might.
What about her defense, Anita, of the Clinton Foundation? Of course, the questions have been raised about whether or not donors were provided with access to Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State, and there was mention of Haiti, for example. Do you think she effectively defended the work of the foundation? Because a lot of people have sort of wondered about sort of the ethics of running that foundation at a time she was Secretary of State and sort of this uncomfortable association with the two.
Well, you know, I think she defended the work of the Clinton Foundation extremely well. Chris actually cut her off because she was headed towards, you know, a full-blown, I can take the rest of this debate, as she said, to talk about the work. And I think she went to the place that when she's talking about the foundation, she should go, which is look at what we did, look at the amazing difference we've made. And nobody argues that the Clinton Foundation did not do and has not done some important things. In particular, I think their work on AIDS in Africa is really something. And, you know.
But what about this notion of a conflict of interest, this sort of access and kind of doing things at the same time? You know, do you think that's business as usual?
You know, it's interesting because I think that it's one of those things that if they could, you know, go back in time, they would do things very differently. One of the things that's interesting about the Clintons is they came up in politics in the 70s, 80s. He was president in the early 90s. And actually, the standards were just very different then. And I think that they continually get themselves in situations where they are functionally behaving in a way that was okay and then doesn't look as okay now.
So Beth, okay, let me go actually hold that thought, because Cecile Richards is the president of Planned Parenthood and a Hillary Clinton supporter. She joins us live from the debate hall in Las Vegas. Cecile, obviously you were listening intently when the issue of Roe v. Wade came up. Donald Trump really seemed to stop short of saying, well, actually, I don't know. What was your interpretation? He kept saying this would go back to the states, that he would appoint pro-life judges. Tell me what you felt the takeaway was on his position there, and if it gave you pause.
Oh, well, it gave me more than pause, Katie, but I think it was one of the clearest moments in the debate of diametrically opposed candidates. Donald Trump has said he wants to he didn't say in so many words he would overturn Roe, but he's going to appoint judges that would do that, which is in effect what it means, which means abortion would become illegal in this country again. Hillary Clinton said, definitively, as she has her entire career, she supports women being able to make their own decisions about their pregnancies with their doctors. And this is something that divides these two candidates. This country believes that abortion should be safe and should be legal and available to women. They also believe that women should be able to access Planned Parenthood. And Donald Trump has said he would end access to Planned Parenthood. Hillary Clinton stated definitively she believes that the health care that we provide is important to folks all across this country, and it should be protected.
What about the exchange, though, about partial birth abortion? Do you believe that Donald Trump painted a picture that was, you know, very uncomfortable for many Americans to hear, and the fact that Hillary Clinton did not vote against partial birth abortions?
Well, I think actually sorry, there's some folks yelling behind me. What we found, I thought Donald Trump showed his complete lack of understanding about women's medical care. And in fact, Hillary talked about the very difficult situations that women and families and couples find themselves in, often with desperately wanted pregnancies. I thought she showed enormous empathy and compassion for American women, standing up for their access to health care and their ability to make the most private, personal decisions, often of their lifetime. Donald Trump having zero understanding of what women go through.
You, of course, have examined Donald Trump's position on abortion through the years, and it seems he went through a major transformation in terms of his views. Do you believe that he is adamantly opposed to abortion, or he is towing the party line to make sure that he's attractive to conservative voters and evangelical voters?
I think it's very difficult to understand what Donald Trump believes about anything. But I will say he stated unequivocally on that stage tonight that he would appoint justices that would overturn Roe versus Wade. And he chose as his running mate Mike Pence, a man who said, you know, his goal in life is to put Roe versus Wade on the ash heap of history. In addition to that, it's not simply about safe and legal abortion access in this country. It's about access to birth control, to family planning services, to cancer screenings. 2.5 million patients come to Planned Parenthood every year. The vast majority of them for preventive care. Donald Trump wants to end all that. There couldn't be a clearer distinction between two candidates. And I think Hillary Clinton tonight was speaking to moderate and independent women and men in this country who are deeply disturbed by the extremism of Donald Trump's position.
All right, Cecile Richards. Cecile, thanks so much for your time as well. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Katie.
Okay, so.
Beth's been holding her thought on the Clinton Foundation.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Olivier.
I want to hear what she has to say.
You know, not so much on just the Clinton Foundation. I think my opinion of this debate was that it was probably Secretary Clinton's worst debate performance. I don't think she was compelling in many of her answers, although some were clear. She bobbled on the Clinton Foundation. I don't think she was strong on some of the foreign policy, the entitlement answers. That being said, she did what she had to do. And so I would still say she won this debate, even though it was her worst debate. Donald Trump, who I believe had his goal in these debates was to show that he was not as risky as people thought he was. He's never been able to really get over that hump, and she's been able to hold him there. And I don't think he moved that ball forward. So to that extent, she survived this debate. Nothing changed, and off she goes.
Didn't you think her tone was different tonight? I thought her tone was more tonight of what they probably were trying to get her not to do in the first two debates, I think successfully, which is to be a little off, a little put off by him, a little lectury, a little clearly irritated, right? The things that are her pitfalls.
And where were other moments that you thought she faced challenges? I mean, in terms of answering the email questions, did she do a very good job of really explaining the situation, or has the campaign made a determination that the less said, the better?
The less said, the better.
That's a good way to put it.
Well, certainly from her answer, you could infer that. I want to just mildly disagree with Beth on one issue, and it comes off of what Cecile said. I thought that she did a very good job tonight in terms of speaking to women and really trying to maximize her message to women in almost every answer, including
I noticed
Social
that
Security.
as well.
And not only that, but while I was listening to the back and forth on partial birth abortion, I think Hillary Clinton gave the single best, least defensive, strongest answer on why this is an important thing, and it's a minuscule number of procedures, right, to begin with. But I was thinking how different this is than even 10 years ago, when this is a question that would have sent Democratic politicians cowering, and that she was fearless on it. So,
and you know, it's interesting because there are a lot of ways you could look mathematically at what we're looking at right now in the electorate. College-educated voters we've talked about before, white college-educated voters should be voting, have voted for Republicans, well in her camp at this point. But really, I mean, Republicans said, back during the primary campaign, a lot of his rivals said he was the worst candidate to run against a woman. And I think that has really borne itself out. When you watch this debate tonight, he really is sort of the perfect candidate for her. He does have this way of berating. He does have this bullying way toward women in particular. This was the problem with Carly Fiorina in the primaries that got him into trouble. His tone with her is so dismissive. And not
even his tone, but also his body language and his expressions when he's listening, I think.
Even where it's contempt that he would show equally toward a male candidate, it comes off differently against a woman. And for her, she has so many problems as a candidate and as a politician. For her, I think that really is a gift. And has been throughout the debate process.
And of course, I think there's been a lot of speculation. What if there had been a different Republican candidate than Donald Trump? Of course, we'd be having a completely different conversation here tonight. Let's go to Ben Carson. I'm sure maybe you all have some questions for him as well. Dr. Carson is a surrogate for the Donald Trump campaign. Of course, he was running for president as well. Hey, Dr. Carson, thanks for talking with us.
Absolutely.
So what were your impressions tonight?
Well, I thought it was a good debate. I thought the tone was a little more civil than it has been in some of the previous debates. And I thought they were able to cover a lot of topics. I thought the moderator did a very good job of trying to maintain control and actually have them answer the questions.
Did any of Donald Trump's answers give you pause, Dr. Carson? For example, when Chris asked him if he would accept the outcome of this election, and he said, "I will look at it at the time." And he said that twice. How did you feel about that answer?
I understand why he said that. You know, we're the only country that I've ever been in, and I ask this question in every country that I go to. We're the only ones that don't require some kind of official ID to vote. So that obviously opens you up to fraud. And there have been a number of irregularities, and both parties should be very concerned about this. We can send the man to the moon. We can do complex surgical procedures. We can invent all kinds of fancy electronic equipment, but we can't verify voting? Give me a break. Why is it that we don't want to do that?
Dr. Carson, it's Matt Bai, and I appreciate your point on a macro level, but as you know, I think there's very little actual documentation of this kind of fraud. And in this particular election, at this particular moment, I'm not aware of any specific threat to the integrity of the system that would justify that kind of unprecedented response to the question. Are you aware of some threat to the integrity of the system that I'm not?
I'm aware of the fact that in many places you don't have to show a voter ID, and that we have people in this country who don't belong here. Well, did you 14% of illegals are registered to vote. Why would they be registered to vote? Is that something we should be concerned about? Absolutely, we should be concerned about it. And I think we need to do something about it. But I think it may be too late to do anything about it in this particular election. But we as a nation need to ensure the integrity of our voting system. Our very existence depends on it.
So do you feel, sir, that the integrity of the outcome of any other previous presidential election probably should be in doubt as well, since the conditions really haven't changed?
Who knows? I don't know anybody who can give you a definitive answer to that question, but I can give you a definitive answer to this question. Should we do something about it? Yes. Do we have the ability to do something about it? Absolutely.
Dr. Carson, it's Olivier Knox.
Yes.
First, I got to tell you, my wife's a big fan of your work at Hopkins.
Thank you.
She crossed paths with you a few times, always described you as very pleasant. And
That's a nice compliment.
She's envious that I get to talk to you right now. I want to start with one of Mr. Trump's very first answers, where he said, the Supreme Court, that's what this is all about. As you travel the country and as you help to court voters on Mr. Trump's behalf, how important has that issue loomed? And do you wish, frankly, that the campaign were more focused on it than they are?
It is an extremely important issue to a lot of people around the country. They recognize that the Supreme Court has become a political body. It wasn't intended to be a political body the way that it was put together, but we have to deal with the fact that that's what it is right now. For instance, there are 4 of the judges. You always know how they're going to vote. And if they get another one to vote with them, then, you know, what is even the point? So, you know, this is not something that should be going on, but it is going on, and we have to deal with it, which means that if the election comes out in one way versus the other way, the 2 different directions that the country will go in will be vastly different. And it's so important that the people understand that. And, you know, it is a democracy. So people have a right to choose that, but they should go into this with their eyes completely open. They should know that we're going to take a strong swing in this direction or a strong swing in that direction.
Dr. Carson, I know you've defended Donald Trump in the face of these women who have come forward talking about sexual misconduct or their experiences with Mr. Trump. He repeatedly said these stories had been debunked. Why do you believe these women should not be believed? And why do you think they don't have a legitimate story to tell about their experiences with Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I have not said that they shouldn't be believed. What I have said is that, you know, that's why we have a court system. You know, we don't just make accusations against people at the last minute and, you know, let it have a deleterious effect. And try it in the court of public opinion. That's not the way things ought to be done. We ought to do things in the proper way. And quite frankly, you know, if these things happen, they will still have happened, you know, in a month or 2 after the election. Why not deal with them then when we have these incredibly important issues that the people have to understand? They have to understand why one candidate wants to raise taxes and one wants to lower taxes, why one wants to secure the border and one wants open borders. And unless we have a chance to really discuss these things, how are they going to make a decision?
Having said that, I think the election is also about character on the part of both candidates. And I'm curious, Dr. Carson, when you heard that audio tape of Mr. Trump in the bus talking about what he'd like to do to women and how his position allowed him to take such actions, if you found that repugnant and in any way disqualifying in terms of his character.
Well, I would say what I found disqualifying is somebody who gets a subpoena from Congress to turn over certain materials and then deletes 33,000 of them and acid washes them, and would have known that that would come to light and that she would get pushback for that. So
but
the
Dr. Carson?
So the stuff must have been pretty awful that was on there that she would take that risk. So I don't justify any of it. What he said on that tape, despicable. No way would I defend that. No reasonable person would defend that.
What does it tell you about Donald Trump's character when you listen to that?
Well, it tells us that these are candidates who have flaws. He has at least apologized for his. I haven't heard Hillary apologize for hers yet. So, you know, that's a character issue as well.
I think she actually has apologized for her emails.
I did not hear her come out and say in the way that he did and how embarrassing that was to him and how that affected, you know, so many people. Have you heard her say that?
Yes, I think she has apologized for her emails. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but I think she has on a number of occasions.
And what about all the other untruths that FBI Director Comey discovered? Has she apologized for those?
You know what? I don't necessarily want to litigate this whole campaign right now, but
but I'm just talking about character.
Right.
You're talking about character, so I'm saying, you know, which character do you want? Do you want a character who, you know, admittedly made some mistakes in his language, or do you want a character that not only said some bad things but did some things that obstruct justice? And you know, you can look at federal
Dr.
law.
Carson, I think that probably the bad language on the bus isn't the only sort of thing that I think people would point to about Donald Trump's record as well. I mean, I think there's
probably.
There's a laundry list of things from Trump University to the Trump Foundation. I mean, again, I don't think we have time to go through all of these things, but certainly there have been flaws in that category as well.
Well, I think we can agree that both candidates have very serious issues. But here's my point, and the point that I seem to have a difficult time getting across to many people in the media. They have character issues, but the issues that are affecting our country right now are massive. And what we do about them will determine the direction of our country, and that's what this election should be about. We can come back and talk about the character issues from now to doomsday. I wish we would, and as I've said many times before, let's bring back the values and principles that made America into a great nation. Let's talk about character issues on a regular basis. Let's teach that to our children. I think we'd be better off for it.
All right. Dr. Ben Carson, always nice to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time.
You too. Thank you.
Okay. So, Ben Carson, well, gee, what do you do with that? Do you want to unpack that for a second, everybody?
I'd just like to start on the ballot integrity thing. And I agree, and I think everybody at this table would agree that ballot integrity is a very important thing. And that if we have poll watchers, we have local election officials, we have secretaries of state, we have all sorts of safeguards because we believe, Democrat, Republicans believes this is an important thing. To throw that into question and to put things on the table that may or may not be true is really a damaging, like I said earlier, a very damaging thing for democracy. And as a Republican sitting here at the table, I just want to reiterate how much Republicans believe in ballot integrity, and that many of us feel that that it's handled very well.
What about the ID issue that Ben Carson brings up?
I know. Well, and I just want to add on to what Beth said, yes, which is that the greater flaws in our voting system are the people who don't get to vote or who are denied their reason to vote, who are denied access to the vote, who get to the polling place and discover that their name isn't on the list. You know, the reality of this is that, you know, we have a patchwork set of voting laws and voting systems and ways to vote. And it's kind of amazing that in 2016 we haven't modernized and we don't have something standard. It takes a lot of money. And what you find in a lot of these states is people just don't want to put the money into modernizing and to bringing stuff up. But there's actually the worst fraud that you find are people being denied the right to vote. And of course, this myth that somehow all these undocumented people are going to vote. There's no evidence for this whatsoever, Katie. And it's really irresponsible, I think, to raise this issue because it has the effect of seeking to depress people who want to vote because they get worried about what's going to happen.
But there are a lot of mechanisms in place in most states that if you come to the poll without license.
But
provisional balloting and so forth.
Provisional voting,
Yeah.
you know, sometimes they make you go to another place to do it, or you have to wait a long time. I mean, it's just not as, you know, it is a way to try to discourage people from voting, which is just wrong in a republic or a democracy, Matt.
I was going to say, I think Ben Carson needs to be schooled by Katrina Pearson at the Trump campaign because clearly he has not understood the distinction.
And we'll talk. Go ahead.
No, but I thought the other thing he said that was really interesting, aside from the stuff about ballot access, he was making a really novel argument a couple of times there, basically saying, maybe Donald Trump's a man who harasses and forces himself on women and has a serious character flaw when it comes to that. But can't we worry about that after he's elected? We have a serious campaign to run here. I mean, in a way, I almost admire that argument. I mean, it's novel, it's different. I think most voters would reject it flat out. I think, you know, there are character issues and then there are character issues. And I think everybody would probably agree, including most Republicans, that sexual harassment and certainly sexual aggression would disqualify you as a presidential candidate. And to hear him make the opposite case, I mean, that's a pretty scary way to run a country, isn't it?
It was novel.
Let's go to Donna Brazil. She's the interim chair of the Democratic National Committee, and she joins us from the debate hall in Las Vegas with her purple hair. Donna, we've been unpacking this debate, and some people on our panel, well, our Republican, Beth Myers, has said that she did not think that Hillary Clinton really did a great job, that it was her weakest debate to date. And something tells me you're going to disagree with that.
Well, I've been all three debates, so I've been in the auditorium. I've watched her. I thought this was her strongest debate. Not only did she connect with voters on how she would pay for important initiatives to grow our economy, to keep people safe and secure. She talked about how her plans will help the middle class, and she also talked about how what I believe her college plans would ensure that every American could have a head start and healthy start. I thought tonight Donald Trump in the last debate got away with this. What have you done for 30 years? And she finally said, well, here's my record. Here's what I've done. And what about you, Donald? I thought this was her strongest debate because she had what I call credible answers, not just sound bites. But she could talk about the deficit. She could talk about Aleppo. She could talk about Syria. She could talk about immigration reform, the Supreme Court. Donald Trump was always, believe me, it's huge, it's big, you know, disaster whenever he was able to become coherent. I thought tonight she showed once again that she has not only the right temperament, the right experience, but there was something that Donald Trump did tonight that I thought was a little bit scary. And I said this is a former campaign manager for Al Gore. I remember that night the Supreme Court decided 5-4, Bush v. Gore. I remember Al Gore calling and saying, shut it down. That's leadership. Tonight, Donald Trump said, oh, it's up to me. I'll make the decision. And then Chris Wallace, I thought, did a good job in saying, Mr. Trump, but what, no. He said, no, I haven't decided yet. Well, in our democracy, it's the voters who decide. It's the citizens who get a chance to decide in terms of who our next President of the United States. He made a mockery of our democracy, and I think he's going to pay a huge price for trying to undermine our electoral process and undermine voters' confidence and their own voting system. Every American who goes to their precinct, whether it's myself in Precinct 48 in Washington, D.C., or any one of you, when we walk into our precinct, we feel like this is our moment to make that decision. And Donald Trump tonight basically said, I don't care what the hell you guys do. It's up to me.
Hey, Donna.
I thought tonight Hillary did a good job.
Donna, it's Olivier.
Hey.
How are you? I asked this question of Sean Spicer. I'm going to ask it of you as well. Who the heck is still undecided at this point?
Oh, well, probably less than 7% of the American people. They're probably scattered over about 5 states. We always come down in the few weeks of the election to a small slice of the American electorate. They're very important. They still have lingering doubts. They still want to hear closing arguments. And over the next 20 days, Hillary Clinton is going to address those issues. She's going to continue to talk about how her plan will grow the economy, how she's going to improve upon the Affordable Care Act, how she's going to help middle-class families and working-class families. I think she's going to have the stronger closing argument, and we're going to bring people out to the polls in record numbers on Tuesday, November 8th.
Can you say anything more about who they are, though? Are they primarily women voters? Are they primarily white voters? Are they primarily minority voters? Are they suburban voters? Who are they?
You know, they're millennials. A lot of them are new. 23 million more millennials since 2012. They want to hear a more positive, robust message. They want to hear from the candidates in terms of some of the concerns they have. You know, we didn't get a chance to talk about climate change, the environment today. That would have been a perfect issue for millennials, racial justice issues. So I think Secretary Clinton has not only what I believe some of the great policy prescriptions, but our Democratic platform addressed many of their concerns. And we're going to reach out to them, and we're going to make sure that they make a resounding noise on Tuesday, November 8th, in support of Secretary Clinton and Senator Tim Kaine.
Donna, I know you have to go, but just one other quick question. A lot of people think that one of the strategies of the Trump campaign is by inserting all this negativity, it will depress voter turnout. How concerned are you as the tenor of the campaign devolves even more than we ever imagined it could, that many people will just say, I'm sick of this whole process, I don't like either candidate, and I'm not coming out to vote?
Well, you know, I can guarantee you there are millions of Americans who are frustrated because they're tired of the vitriol, the vile, the crude things that I do believe is coming from Donald Trump. But you know what? Tuesday, November 8th is going to be a historic day, and I would encourage every American, if you're able to vote early, go ahead and get it over with. Go ahead in Iowa, go ahead in Wisconsin, go ahead and get it over with. But if you're in one of those states that you only have one day, then get ready. If you can vote absentee, go ahead and do it. But if you can vote early, this weekend we have All Souls to the polls here in the great state of Nevada, and Georgia, Florida, North Carolina. We're going to start taking millions of Americans to the polls because people know that our democracy works when everyone is able to vote. And when everyone votes, there's no question in my mind that the outcome will be sound enough and serious enough for Donald Trump to even recognize that he lost.
All right, Donna Brazile. Donna, thank you very much. Good to see you. Donna Brazile just mentioned the millennials, and Carlos Watson is editor-in-chief of Ozzy.com. He joins us from the Bay Area, and Ozzy, of course, really serves primarily a millennial audience. So, Carlos, tell us what you're hearing tonight about the debate and what millennials are saying.
So 2 things, Katie. One, I think the issues of abortion and immigration clearly animated a lot of people, but I think they particularly struck home with millennials who I think took both issues probably more in the direction of Hillary Clinton. I think Clinton's stance, which was incredibly strong on the question of abortion, I think is going to end up continuing to resonate well for her. And I wonder whether issues like bad hombres will take what has already been a tough issue for Donald Trump with millennials and make it even more difficult, remembering that millennials are more diverse than the older generations. And so it'll be interesting to watch. I think overall, what was probably the best debate of the 3, if you can call it that way, I think among millennials will probably help Secretary Clinton more than it will Donald Trump.
Did Donald Trump score any points on any of the topics that were raised tonight, Carlos? Did his position seem to resonate?
You know, it was clear that people were interested in the Russia and Ukraine topic. You saw that trending not only among those 55 and older, but also those 18 to 34. Unclear whether that helped him or not, but it was interesting to see that issue resonate as well. I thought part of what was interesting, too, is that he probably missed an opportunity, I think, on the economy, maybe to score more points and to bring into that issues like education and others. In fact, you have to wonder at the very end if he hurt himself among at least some, not only millennials of color, but I think millennials are more broad-minded with his comment about trying to attract African-American and Latino voters and saying you have no jobs and you have no education. I think that kind of shorthand, I suspect, actually hurt Donald Trump.
And what about the economy in terms of what Hillary Clinton had to say? You know, obviously millennials are concerned about their job opportunities, their job prospects, wage stagnation. Did Hillary Clinton excite them in terms of her plans for their economic futures?
I don't think so. I mean, I think she has been, as Matt Bai, I think, was saying earlier in your show, I think she's a wonky, prepared candidate. But in terms of exciting people in the way that you saw candidate Obama do in 2008, I still don't think you see that here. I think the larger issue is the one that you guys have been talking about all night, where it just felt like this was a last chance for a candidate who now in many polls is double digits behind, certainly in several key swing states. And it didn't feel like he made the kind of progress, not just with millennials, but with others. And in fact, it felt like he hurt himself. I think what you guys have been talking about in terms of would he accept the election result seems to be one. But the reality is, if he hadn't said that, I think the other headline of the night would have been such a nasty woman. And that only would have continued to make it more difficult for him to kind of attract some of the undecided voters. Finally, I thought it was interesting what Donna Brazile said again about early voting and whether, in fact, what was said tonight will actually accelerate early voting around the country.
And real quickly, Carlos, before we go, you know, it was surprising to me just a couple of weeks ago, and I don't think it's any secret that Hillary Clinton has been having trouble energizing and exciting millennial voters. Have you seen that shift in recent weeks, particularly in the wake of that Access Hollywood tape?
You certainly have. You've seen in the polls movement, just as you've seen in the rest of the demographics, some 4 or 5 points, people moving not only from undecided, but in some cases from some of the third-party candidates. I think it'll be interesting to watch in places like Colorado, where there still was a large number of folks siding with Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, whether you start to see an evaporation there. But I think, again, one of the other things about Donald Trump that has struck me is that some of the folks who you think could have been helpful to him in his pursuit of voters in general, and perhaps millennial voters in particular, were really dramatically absent at a time he needed. I mean, where was Ivanka Trump over the last several weeks when she could have perhaps been a more powerful surrogate than her father? Melania Trump obviously gave a couple of interviews recently, but in contrast to Hillary Clinton in 1992 or even Maria Shriver in 2003 during the recall election with Arnold Schwarzenegger, was not immediately present. And I think, again, the erosion that you've seen across the spectrum certainly will show up among millennials as well.
All right. Carlos Watson is of Ozzy.com. Carlos, good to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Good to be with you guys.
Thank you. Meanwhile, we're going to go to Brian Goldsmith. He's our political consultant. And Brian, I think you've been paying attention sort of to the fact-checking. The fact-checkers, I think, must have been pretty busy tonight on both sides.
Our fingers are tired. I think people have said this is a post-fact-check election, and I really hope not, because there's actually a lot to go through. And the candidates' plans and what they say during the campaign are the single best indicators of how they're actually going to perform in office. So these campaign promises really do matter. So let me just tick through a few things that both candidates had problems with tonight. Starting with Hillary Clinton, she mentioned that Trump Tower was built by illegal immigrants. It was actually a Trump contractor that hired the workers, not Trump himself. Chris Wallace talked about the $225,000 that Hillary Clinton was paid by a Brazilian bank. At one point she said, it's not true. I don't know whether she was referring to the open borders quote or the amount she was paid. That was in fact true. She said that Trump publicly invited Putin to hack into Americans' emails. Well, to be precise, he really invited Putin to hack into her emails and the 30,000 emails that are missing or were deleted. And to the point about those emails, Trump made a legitimate case. The congressional subpoena came for Benghazi-related emails on March 4th of last year, and an employee deleted about 30,000 of her emails sometime after March 25th. Now, we don't know whether those emails were particularly related to Benghazi, but the fact checkers kind of rate that as half true. In terms of what Trump has said, the fact-checking list is longer. It is true, for the 100th time, he did not oppose the Iraq War at the beginning. He said that the Iran deal was an invitation or would lead to more nuclear weapons for Iran. There's a policy debate there, but for the first 8 to 10 years, the deal actually does impose serious restrictions on Iran's ability to go nuclear. He did reject what the intelligence community says on Russia. There really isn't uncertainty about that. Hillary Clinton has never said she wants to abolish the Second Amendment. Trump has said that repeatedly. There's no evidence of that. He said that Trump wants abortion, Trump has said that Clinton wants abortion until the last day of pregnancy. She's always been in favor of restrictions, but with exceptions for the life and health of the mother, as she said tonight. And on taxes, finally, there's not an equivalence. Trump has proposed about a $6 trillion tax cut that would add massively to the debt. Hillary Clinton has proposed about a $1 trillion tax increase. Her spending comes in at sort of under that level, and so she doesn't add significantly to the debt with her plans.
And real quickly, I know you've been monitoring social media all night. So what is sort of the general, I guess it depends on who you're following, of course, when it comes to Twitter, but what's sort of the general sentiment online?
Well, I think a lot of the commentary has really been subsumed by Trump's comment about not accepting the election results or leaving everyone in suspense. I was really struck by the AP's headline. The Associated Press usually plays it pretty down the middle, and their lead was threatening to upend a basic pillar of American democracy. Donald Trump refused Wednesday night to say he would accept the results of the November election if he loses. Now, there were some other things that got social media, Twitter, pardon the pun, bad hombres, of course, nasty woman, when he chimed in that he should have won that Emmy, the fact that there wasn't a single question about climate change, the abortion debate. So it was a variety of things, but I think the dominant theme was really his refusal to say that he would concede if he doesn't win the election.
All right, Brian Goldsmith. Brian, thanks so much for that.
Thanks.
So where do we go from here? I mean, we're going to get a quick assessment of sort of what was talked about in terms of the economy from our Rick Newman, who's a columnist for Yahoo, in just a second. And we always enjoy hearing Rick's perspective. But moving forward, it's less than 3 weeks till Election Day.
Yeah.
And so what can we expect moving forward? Pretty much more of the same?
Well, I think you're going to see the candidates continuing to move on their parallel universes. I mean, she will begin to make her closing argument, and I think that coming out of this debate, you know, she'll be presenting her vision of America. I suspect that, you know, her closing argument will go towards a more positive, this is the kind of president I will be, this is who I'm going to fight for. And he will continue on his Trumpian path to wherever he plans to end up on election night, not conceding, or at least waiting to see what the voters have to say and then deciding whether or not he believes the voters really meant what they said at the election booths. But I think that, you know, Katie, it's the last 18, 19 days of a campaign after the last debate, then you go out there and you make your closing argument. You go to the battleground states. You try to do it. And I think what the Clinton campaign has clearly signaled is they're going to try to expand that map.
Right, they're moving on to red states like Arizona, Georgia.
Arizona and Georgia were both states in 2008. Had John McCain not been the Republican nominee, it's a state we would have looked at very closely on the Obama campaign. And Georgia is a state that we looked at and invested in for a while in 2008. So I think Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, which is becoming more purple all the time, and maybe we'll see what other states come onto the map.
What about you say at Texas?
I was going to ask you about Texas because
still not there.
It's not there, but it seems to be tightening considerably, which is pretty shocking, isn't it, Matt?
Well, the whole map has been pretty shocking to this point. I mean, I'm still dubious that some of these states we always say are in play will in the end be in play. But I think, you know, what Anita's talking about in terms of the map is particularly important for Hillary Clinton because no matter what, whether she wins by 5 electoral votes or 50 electoral votes, if she wins this election, and she's on track to do that, the narrative is going to be, people are going to say, I'm going to say, you had a historically bad opponent, and were a historically weak candidate on a lot of the metrics that we use, and then she has to turn around and govern with that reality. And I think there's a big difference between turning around and saying, you know, there was a historically weak opponent, you were a very weak and flawed candidate, and you won by a couple of electoral votes, and being able to say, well, okay, but I got a 100 electoral vote margin, and no Democrats done that in an awfully long time, since like Lyndon Johnson. And
so
that
moving
gives
forward,
me some
it really
kind
matters.
of mandate. I think, you know, I think she's got work to do either way. I don't think she has an easy road ahead of her if she's elected, but I think that road is somewhat, not significant, I wouldn't overplay it, it's somewhat easier if she can claim, you know, that at least she beat a weak opponent with a very large margin.
Let's go to Rick Newman real quickly, and then I'll get to you, Olivier, because we want to know what the headline is tomorrow on Yahoo Finance. Rick, what did you think? Are you tired of this whole thing?
Yes, honestly, I think they're having a largely pointless conversation on the economy. They're talking about these sort of industrial era 20th century ideas, Hillary Clinton about, you know, all these infrastructure jobs that are going to sort of give us better economic growth. If you look at her plan, there's almost no likelihood she will get the huge tax increases that she needs to fund this big infrastructure plan, which is really the biggest part of her job plan. And so you sort of take that away and you say what's left, and it's a bunch of really sort of small ball proposals. So she has a plan, she just can't pay for it. And even when we had $780 billion in stimulus spending back in 2009, that made a modest difference. That did help get us out of a terrible recession. That type of stimulus spending does not work so well when you're not in a recession. When the economy's doing better, you get less bang for the buck from that kind of stimulus spending, and it's just not very inspiring. On Trump's side, if he were to get elected and actually start to renegotiate these trade deals the way he says he would do it, corporate America would go bananas. I don't know how this would shake out, but it would definitely spook markets right off the bat. One analysis I've written about, mainstream, middle-of-the-road analysis, says the stock market would fall 7% the day Donald Trump got elected. That tells you what corporate America feels about the prospects here. And what I think is really distressing is you're hearing nothing in the conversation about the digital economy, about what automation is doing to factory floors. I think there's mounting evidence that automation is a much bigger factor in the decline of manufacturing employment.
Well, in fact, I'm so glad you raised that, Rick, because that's been my little pet peeve, because I keep quoting the study that said between 2000 to 2010, only 13% of manufacturing jobs were lost because of trade. The rest have, in fact, been lost to automation. And I'm wondering why none of the candidates, or neither candidate, is talking about how we really move from an industrial to a technological society.
I think the answer is economists haven't figured this out yet. Right. And one other thing that's important to point out is manufacturing output is actually up. It's not down. So the work is still here. It's the workers that are going away. So you're not seeing manufacturing output go to other countries. You're just seeing the work go away, and no one really knows where it's going. This is a very hard problem to solve. There's no soundbite such as China's killing our jobs. I mean, really, the soundbite is Silicon Valley is killing our jobs, and the internet is killing our jobs. That's not going to work, and there just are not really great solutions for this yet. It's kind of a new problem still, but these are the problems of the future, and it feels like we're talking about the problems of the past. You know, create more assembly line jobs for lower skill workers. Nobody wants to create those jobs here.
All right, bummer. Rick Newman. on that note,
But
Rick.
exactly right.
Rick, yeah, no, that's true.
The
It's true.
alternative, but the alternative,
21st century economy here.
but the alternative is to say to the voters, the jobs are not coming back, and I don't know.
No, I don't agree with you, Olivia. I don't think. I mean, yes, the short answer.
If it's automation,
why don't you hear more about it? Is that there is no easy answer, but there are people who've thought about solutions. What we have here is not an absolute lack of ideas. We have a vastly changed country with two more baby boomer candidates, both of whom are the oldest candidates in our history. Both of whom grew up in an entirely different economy and started their political careers in an entirely different economy with an entirely different kind of debate. And while millennials are right now supplanting baby boomers as the largest share of the population, the debate could practically be lifted from 1988 and brought here to this stage. And I think we will look back on our history when all the rest of this is done and all the craziness about nasty woman and bad hombres and all the other good movie titles that we've come up with. Wrong. I think, we will look back at this election and say, what a lost opportunity to move the country forward and to talk about the future where most of the electorate is headed, when you have two candidates who are firmly, I believe,
and maybe that's why millennials are so turned off by this whole debate, because obviously nothing's being discussed that feels like it has has any relevance to their place in the world and what they're going to be doing with their lives. Doesn't feel like it has a lot of relevance to our place in the world.
They don't have a dog in the hunt, and with Barack Obama, they did have a dog in the hunt. They felt he was a new generation, and now the baton is being passed backwards, and it's an unusual dynamic.
Did you have a thought before I went to Rick Newman?
Oh, no, I just was going to say that on the narrow point of the question of automation versus trade, no, the point is still, if it's automation, we can't bring it back.
No, you're not bringing it back. You have to find other ways.
And that's a nightmare. That's a nightmare argument for the average politician or even the above average.
Yeah, but even Republicans, I will say, for Marco Rubio, and I was critical of him on, I interviewed him several times during the primaries and was critical on some of, the vagueness of his policy platform. But he talks about, I think, with some courage that, look, nobody wants to make T-shirts here anymore. Why are we having an argument about how to bring back factories that make T-shirts? We don't want those jobs. Let them have them. We need different kinds of jobs. There are some flaws. You're not creating nearly as much work in that way. But that's the kind of debate I think the country
in many
deserves.
ways, not to be ageist, but I mean, he represents really a different generation.
He does, and I am ageist.
Than Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Anyway.
Or somebody like Mark Warner, who's been spending a lot of time digging down into issues around the sharing economy and how do you really make sure those workers are protected and what kinds of classification. I mean, there are all kinds of things.
And what you do with the industries that are going through tremendous upheaval as a result of the sharing economy.
And so there's a lot of interesting stuff going on out there. It just didn't make its way into the presidential campaign.
And it needs leadership. You talk about Mark Warner's work. There is a caucus of people. There are people in the Congress talking about this, trying to work with this issue. It requires leadership on the executive level, and if we're going to get it, it's not going to be previewed in this.
And it requires some tough answers and imagination, and not telling people what they want to hear. Right, some of the harsh realities of where we are and where we're headed.
And telling narrow constituencies what they want to hear. Not only the willingness to tell people what they don't want to hear, but we have candidates increasingly in this country, not just in this election, telling narrow constituencies what they want to hear because it's all about base mobilization. And it's, frankly, it's an abdication.
All right. Well, on that happy note.
And more good news from the other side.
Anita, Olivier, Matt, Beth, thanks for coming. Did you have a good time? Anita's been with us before, and you're a newbie. Did you enjoy yourself?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
If you just stay in this chair, we'll probably have another event of some kind at some point in the next 2 weeks.
Anyway, thanks so much, everyone, as always. And
thank you.
One piece of advice: do not eat a coconut macaroon before you have to talk to an audience. Note to self. Well, what happened in Vegas tonight definitely will not stay in Vegas as we wrap things up for the third and final presidential debate. It was a night with a little more substance than we've been used to so far in this campaign, but the headline tomorrow will likely be that Donald Trump refused to say that he would accept the election results on November 8th. In typical showbiz fashion, he said, "I'll keep you in suspense." So I guess we're going to try to do the same. Stay with Yahoo News for all the twists and turns from the campaign trail, and join us right here on election night for full coverage of what will be a historic night, no matter who wins. We look forward to hearing what you have to say. You can follow Yahoo News and me on Facebook and Twitter. Follow everybody, I think, here on Twitter at least, right? And Facebook, right? Does everyone have?
Not Twitter.
Except for Anita. Anita
we'll
is
get
not
Anita
on Twitter. But use the hashtag Debates2016 and to let us know what you think about everything you saw tonight on the debate and heard from our group of panelists. I'm Katie Couric. We'll see you next time.